Chapter 83. 2. Chapter 83. 2. In comparison to the people that Zhao Yuanfeng had brought, the Guan family's troops were greater in number, and with their might, subduing these few archers was even more of a cinch. With Guan Lianghan's help, the archers were quickly brought in check. As the remaining fighters were also pressed under the blows of Zhao Yuanfeng and Xiao Xiao's swords, several of the enemy fighters were all turning pale with fright. The situation in which they were confident of its success had suddenly turned on its head. Who knew why, that at this moment against all reason, how such a slip-up had occurred? Guan Lianghan stepped forward and kicked one of the fighters, who had been in the forefront of the attack, in the jaw. "Hey, tell me clearly, who sent you here?" The fighter stared at them and jerked his throat. Seeing this, Zhang Ruan immediately called out, "It's no good, they are about to kill themselves." To her surprise, these people were actually suicide soldiers. Once their mission had failed and they were unable to return with their mission completed, once they fell into the hands of their enemies, they would naturally ingest poison and commit suicide. However, what sort of person was Xiao Xiao? Ever since he had joined the Genie Guards at the age of 10, he was deeply knowledgeable of these sort of tricks. Such a move displayed right before his eyes was like one trying to display their slight skill before an expert. Thus, in a blink of an eye, he had dislocated several of their jaws. This made it impossible to swallow the poison that was hidden under their tongues, and in pain, a few of the fighters began rolling on the ground. With Xiao Xiao's sudden sleight of hand, it had saved them much effort on many affairs. Everyone present heaved a sigh of relief. Zhang Exanji, who had just escaped from a calamity, cupped his hands in salute. "This day, it is many thanks to the gentlemen present. However, I have a question that I would like to seek for your wise guidance." His question had yet to reach its end when he heard a gentle voice, "Dage." Zhang Exanji was startled. Zhang Ruan had already begun to lift up the dolly on her head, and then threw it aside. As she revealed the face underneath the hat, seeing Zhang Exanji's blank and distracted look, she then lightly laughed and again uttered, "Dage." In the depths of her eyes, there was a concealed, minute trace of watery glimmer. Zhang Exanji motionlessly stared at the young girl before his eyes. Ever since he had left the capital 5 years ago, he had never heard any news of Zhang Ruan ever again. The young girl before him was extremely foreign, yet in that appearance of hers, there was still a familiar feeling. Who was this? In the depths of his memories, the soft, immature and adorable little girl that would tug on his clothes and shyly call him Dage had already disappeared. The young lady before him still had the facial features of that young girl in the past. Shedding off her former childish nature, it was as if a flower was currently in bloom and already had traces of a youthful and inexperienced bearing of gracefulness. His Mimi, she had already grown up. As the hoods of his eyes welled up in warmth, Zhang Exanji called out, "Arwan." Whilst Zhang Exanji had been sizing Zhang Ruan up, she too had quietly taken a measure of him. The Zhang family had always preferred the pen to the sword. Thus, the sons and grandsons of the Zhang family were not allowed to enter the military ranks and could only enter through the official ranks. Zhang Exanji had always given the bearing of a cultured and refined young master. However, whilst his facial features remained handsome, he had lost his natural charm as a refined youth. His skin was now somewhat more tan than before, and he had gained the hardened grit that one had after experiencing a baptism of war and blood. It was a stalwartness that was characteristic to a soldier. This man and the Zhang Exanji that was in her memories were entirely different. Moreover, meeting him thus once more, it had already been a separation of a whole lifetime. As she slowly walked forward, Zhang Exanji lowered his head to gaze at her. Gently widening her arms without a care about the looks of everyone present, Zhang Ruan hugged Zhang Exanji. She greeted, "Welcome back, Dage." As the two brother and sister finally met, Zhao Yuanfeng rubbed away the stinging tears that began to develop in his eyes. He then asked Xiao Xiao and Guan Lianghan, who were standing to the side, Xiaowang General Guan, "Why are the both of you at this place?" Xiao Xiao had yet to answer when Guan Lianghan responded, "Someone was putting their hands on my deputy general. How could I still watch with folded arms? Rather, I would like to see, who would have such great courage to conspire to murder me?" Also, Guan Lianghan and Xiao Xiao had suddenly turned up and lent a hand, and with that, Zhao Yuanfeng frowned whilst Zhao Yi was somewhat at a loss. Zhang Ruan smiled slightly, then many thanks to Wang Yan General. With those people preparing this many archers, one could suppose that this is unlikely to be the work of any normal person. Perhaps they might even be spies of another country, or perhaps they might have been rebelling troops. One might find it hard to ascertain. This situation is no small matter, and could even concern the safety of the current political climate in the Great Jin dynasty. Would you two Darren please investigate until you reach the bottom of this matter? With just a comment of hers, she had redirected the current situation towards the possibility of it being a rebels' conspiracy. Whilst she had spoken rather exaggeratedly, the people on the ground had all, without exception, looked upon Zhang Ruan with a sharp glower. Whilst both Zhao Yuanfeng and Zhao Yi were choked between laughter and tears, Xiao Xiao looked at her profoundly and Guan Lianghan furrowed his brows. Zhang Xing patted Zhang Ruan's head. Ruan, what you said, what did you mean? Zhang Ruan smiled at him. I was thinking that Dage was merely making his first ever return to the capital. How could Dage have suddenly provoked someone to create an ambush to murder you, or perhaps, amidst this chaos, it is not clear if that person might even have other plots behind this affair. These people are all suicide soldiers, their mouths are sealed tight. How can it be so easy for them to confess? Guan Lianghan sneered. Scenes of graphic torture/animal violence ahead. Skip until. Naturally, the normal criminal sentences that one would usually utilize are useless in this situation. 1. They are unafraid of pain. 2. They are unafraid of death, so to pry open their mouths would be even harder than reaching the sky. Zhang Ruan faintly continued, however, I once heard of a method of slowly cutting one's skull open, then scalding hot oil would be poured inside. The person would not be dead, therefore they would be able to feel the sensation of their brains being slowly burned. Even if this person was the most unyielding type, they would be unable to bear being subjected to this. In a daze, everyone stared at her in shock and fear. As they all listened to the method that Zhang Ruan described, they all felt terrified. When the fighters on the ground heard this, their bodies trembled slightly and Zhao Yi gulped. Biaomei, wherever did you hear this method from? Zhang Ruan smiled lightly. I heard this from a person who had traveled widely. This sort of method was not used to deal with people, it was used to deal with monkeys. In their region, the locals are fond of eating one delicacy, and that was eating uncooked monkey brains. Once the monkey had been set on the table and had their cranium sliced open, hot oil would be poured inside, and while it was piping hot, one would eat. Eating in this manner would be extremely fresh. Ruan Yang had thought this act was too excessively cruel, as those monkeys would be chattering incessantly, until the brain had been completely partaken. Seeing those people on the ground, her tone was as gentle as always. I am unsure how these people would think of the taste of eating their own brains. Thinking about it, this truly is cruel. Violence ends ********. Zhao Yuanfeng chuckled as well. Certainly, that is too ruthless. However, this is all for the sake of conducting affairs for the people. For the Great Jin dynasty's safety, who allowed these people to harbor such evil intentions? General Guan, you certainly have to interrogate them carefully. This pair of uncle and niece were both echoing one another, and those on the ground were close to passing out in a grievance. Zhang Xing was somewhat astonished. The Zhang Ruan in his memories was kind-hearted and pure. If it was only an ant, she too would be unable to bear squishing it. Yet at present, these words of hers, if he did not hear the underlying hints in them, then he had lived these few years in vain. Only, as he gazed upon Zhang Ruan's ruthlessness before him, he did not feel the slightest shred of unhappiness. Instead, what was present was a deep distress on her behalf. To make such a young girl who had been ill-versed in worldly affairs and was wholly innocent reach this point, Zhang Ruan had most definitely suffered much pain. As Guan Lianghan listened to Zhang Ruan's words, he thoughtfully looked at Zhang Xing. Then he glanced at Xiao Xiao as he questioned, you are? Those few words that Emotsong had referred to her as, that malicious woman, were stuck in his throat. Guan Lianghan lightly coughed. Xing's younger sister. Zhang Ruan nodded her head. Zhao Yi patted Zhang Xing's shoulder. Biaodi Xing, I'm your Biaoga. He pointed to Zhao Yuanfeng. He is my third uncle, your maternal uncle. Biaodi, younger male cousin via female line. Biaoga, older male cousin via female line. Although Zhang Xing was astonished, Seeing as these people had just saved his life and upon seeing how they had seemed to have interacted with Zhang Ruan with no malicious intentions, he then smiled. Biaoge, third maternal uncle. Zhao Yuanfeng replied, Ruan, now that Xinji has returned, both of you siblings should just stay in the general fu then. Zhang Ruan shook her head, no, that's fine. Dage, let's return to the Jiang Fu. With Jiang Xinji returning in the flush of his success, how would it be okay if they didn't add some blockades for that mother-daughter pair? One would fear that just at the sight of Jiang Xinji's healthy and intact state, they would also puke up blood. If they had instead returned to the general fu, then, how would one still be able to stir up the dramatic play awaiting them? Jiang Xinji had always willingly and obediently gone along with Zhang Ruan's requests, so naturally, he agreed. Zhao Yuanfeng frowned but then felt relieved, so he acceded to her wants. Fine. With your elder brother by your side, it is unlikely that you would get bullied by others there. If there truly is anything amiss, the general fu will always be your perch to rely on for support. Over the last few years, the general fu and the Jiang fu had lost any and all connection to each other. Thus, in this moment, with the appearance of having good relations between this sibling pair from the Jiang family, this held another layer of meaning in the eyes of Xiao Xiao and Guanliang Han. Zhang Ruan walked before Xiao Xiao. As Xiao Xiao lowered his head to look down at her, Zhang Ruan smiled lightly. Usually, these people would be handed over to Biaoge and third maternal uncle to investigate. Clearly, however, since General Guan and Xiao Wangye have interfered in matters, then we too will just have to do you a favor at little cost and hand these men to these two Darren. If something truly comes out of this, then it would certainly be of great merit and service, and His Majesty would bestow something to General and Wangye. When such a matter arises, please do not forget the efforts that the Zhao family has expended in this matter. Xiao lifted his eyebrows as his beautiful eyes fixed on her. Today, a chance encounter inevitably helped out the Zhao family. Yet according to Zhang Ruan's account, the situation was changed and they were the ones who ought to be offering their thanks to the Zhao family? She was definitely not one who was going to suffer a loss under any circumstances, so much so that even verbally she was a master at gaining the upper hand. However, as Xiao Xiao looked upon those who were lying on the ground, he had to admit that what Jiang Ruan had done was not without its uses. Take for example these men. They would most definitely be of good use. On the other hand, Zhao Yuanfeng and Zhao Yi were somewhat surprised. Until this moment, Zhang Ruan had not forgotten to speak up for the Zhao family. Rather, if they were to go with what she had once said, she would not harm the Zhao family. Moreover, at least for this matter, perhaps the Zhao family would still receive a lot of benefit. Jiang Xinji gently gazed at Zhang Ruan. Now, it seemed that Zhang Ruan would handle matters suitable for the occasion, as she clearly had her own definite opinions. With every manner, every move she made, nowhere was there any remaining semblance of the bearing of a little girl anymore. As he noted this, he was doubly sad yet gratified. What the cost was behind such a lightning-quick growth in maturity, the youth that he was who had once left home, no one was more clearer than he of what this sacrifice meant. Inwardly, Jiang Xinji had decided, now that he had returned to the capital, he would definitely protect Zhang Ruan, and not allow her to be taken advantage of by anyone in the Jiang family. His Mimi would naturally be cusped in his both hands, just like any other young lady of an influential family, to have her fill of doting and pampering. Zhang Ruan seemed to have some insight into what he was thinking and lightly patted his hands. Dage, over the past few years I have lived well, and being able to see you again has made it all the more better. With you back in the capital now, and knowing that you've attained meritorious military commendations, if you do not ride on your horse and be paraded through the capital, then that would simply fail to live up to all of your numerous efforts on the battlefield. I want everyone from the Great Jin's capital to see your heroic appearance, and I want you to become the capital's youngest hero. She wanted everyone who had ever looked down, everyone who had trampled all over them in the dust, to see and be absolutely sure that even though this had been how it had been in the past, they had crossed paths once more. And how the tables have turned. For those who had once thought that they would see a mockery of these siblings once more, they would now find themselves brought beneath their very soles by this pair of siblings, a pair of brother and sister who would rise above them all. Chapter 84. 1. Chapter 84. 1. The floods and the resulting damage caused much stress and exhaustion for the people in the capital city, especially as the spring rains continued to fall ceaselessly. However, the continual efforts in the past few days of 8th Prince and 2nd Young Master of the Grand Counselor's Fu to manage the water level were beginning to show preliminary results. Added to this, more and more people had joined the group distributing kanji, so the situation had somewhat stabilized. The capital city gradually resumed its usual sense of order. For instance, this afternoon, the Guan family troops had returned to the capital in triumph from the border, earlier than expected. The orderly mass of solemn-looking troops covered almost the entire capital. They were led by the daring and energetic, tall and powerful Guan Liang Han. Riding abreast of him was an extremely handsome young man. Although a military man, he did not appear crude and boorish. On the contrary, he had the air and grace associated with a younger member of the nobility, but he was unfamiliar to many. At the rear of the troops came a horse carriage, but no one knew what manner of person sat within. The Zhao uncle and nephew, together with Xiao Xiao, had already left. Zhang Xing heeded Zhang Ruan's advice and rode around the capital. He did not think much of it. He simply thought that Zhang Ruan, being a young girl, just wanted to show off. Zhang Ruan sat in the carriage while Lian Qiao surreptitiously pulled aside a corner of the curtain to peep outside. She exclaimed in surprise, "Eldest young master is really awe-inspiring. The people are all looking at him." Bai Ji also smiled as she said, "Now that eldest young master is back, only happy days will follow Miss from now on." Lian Qiao rolled her eyes and a crafty expression flashed across her face. "That person in Yan Huayuan will be so angry that she'll kick up a terrific fuss." Zhang Ruan smiled faintly but declined to comment. When Xia Yin saw Zhang Xing returning intact, she would not merely be angry. This matter would not be concluded so easily. However, if she really wanted to scheme against Zhang Xing, then she should not imagine that she would herself leave this game unscathed. As for Xian Li and Lian, she had a big gift for them in the future. At present, Zhang Xing was a young man who showed great promise. Looking at his bearing as well as that of Guan Liang Han, it was easy for people to guess that he was the deputy general who had risen internally through the ranks due to his military achievements, but they had never expected him to be so young. Many of the young ladies and married women who were lining the streets blushed as they tossed silk flowers onto his horse. Zhang Xing concealed a smile. After so many years of experience, his self-control was excellent. At first glance, he looked just like a confident scholar. Among the onlookers were also Furins and young ladies from the families of government officials. When they witnessed this scene, they started making inquiries as to the identity of this deputy general. It was at this time that some unknown person in the crowd suddenly yelled, "Isn't he eldest young master from Minister Zhang's Fu? I heard he joined the army 5 years ago. Never imagined that he would return to the capital with military accolades." One pebble can stir up 1,000 waves. As soon as this remark was uttered, everyone began to comment. "I was just saying that he looked familiar, and it turns out that he is the eldest son of the Zhang family. TSK, since there's been no news of him for so many years, for him to appear today must be cause for great pride and elation. So it turns out that the Zhang family has this eldest young master, but it seems like I've never heard the people in the Zhang family talk about him. What's there not to understand about this situation? Right now, the stepmother is the one calling the shots in the Zhang family. When all is said and done, he is not her flesh and blood. Wasn't there also no news about eldest Zhang Miss for 5 years or so? On thinking about it, I'm afraid that eldest young master Zhang did not leave home voluntarily at the time. In the end, everything is all good. Eldest young master Zhang has achieved military merit, and eldest Zhang Miss is as precious and beautiful as jade. In comparison with second young master, eldest young master Zhang's prospects are much better. I have no idea what Minister Zhang was thinking about, favoring that second young master over such an outstanding eldest young master. Jade symbolizes beauty, grace, and purity. According to this article, Confucius said that there are 11 virtues represented in jade: benevolence, justice, propriety, truth, credibility, music, loyalty, heaven, earth, morality, and intelligence. You don't understand the situation. What good is there to say about men always spoiling their mistresses and neglecting their wives? When the former mistress of the household was still around, the current Zhang Furin was just a concubine. Tongues were wagging fast and furiously in the crowd and all manner of things were being said. Most of the comments were in praise of Zhang Xing and his sister, while disparaging Xia Yan's family. In the carriage, Zhang Ruan smiled faintly to herself. Trampling on those who had fallen while flattering those held in high esteem was always the tendency of the people. At present, Zhang Xing was a young man who showed great promise, and the prospects of his official career were good. Naturally, the air would ring with praise and accolades. Moreover, the more outstanding he showed himself to be, the more incapable Jiang Chao would seem. In Yanhua Yuan, Xia Yan was slowly sipping her tea as she reclined on the soft couch. Today, she had made arrangements to take care of the one thing that she was concerned about. Given the combined efforts of the Xia and Li families, she had no cause to believe that Zhang Xing could escape this calamity. She pursed her lips as she swallowed a sip of tea. Just like that, Zhang Xing would die. As for Zhang Ruan, she had nothing to worry about. When she had time, she would tidy up that loose end as well. However, for some unknown reason, when she had woken up early that morning, she had felt a faint sense of unease, which was reflected in the slight fretfulness that tinged her expression without her realizing it. Upon seeing this, Fei Chui said consolingly, "Foreign does not need to be anxious. This endeavor will not fail. We simply have to wait for the good news." Before Xia Yan could say anything, she saw that the door curtain was being pushed aside. Lin Lang hurried into the room, and with a panicked expression on her face she said, "It's not good, Foreign. Eldest young master has returned." "What did you say?" Xia Yan stood up immediately, her beautiful face suffused with a fierce malevolence. In one swift move she grabbed Lin Lang's shoulder and said, "Zhang Xing has returned? How can this be? Did you see wrongly?" "Foreign, this is absolutely true." Lin Lang continued. General Guan and eldest young master led the troops in a parade around the capital streets. Everyone has seen them and the people are talking. It is indeed eldest young master. There's no mistake. Xia Yan reeled and collapsed onto the soft couch, muttering, "How can this be? There's no way this could happen unless Zhang Xing is receiving supernatural protection." As she was saying this, Xiao Si rushed in from outside and said, "Foreign, eldest young master is at the entrance of the Fu, and General Guan and the troops are with him. Foreign had best hurry over to welcome them before misunderstanding and gossip arise." "Me welcome him?" Xia Yan could not hold back the shriek which escaped her mouth. God knows she was dying to kill him at the moment, but she had to slap on a smiling face, pretend to be a caring mother and welcome him. If she did not do so, and this was the cause of the mighty struggle within her now, her standing in the eyes of the people would drop, and who knows what nonsense about evil stepmothers she would have to deal with. "Fine, I'll welcome him." Xia Yan gritted her teeth and said, "I'm on my way right now to welcome my good son." Lin Lang and Fei Chui stood to one side, not daring to say or do anything in the current atmosphere. Xia Yan had just led her servants to the entrance, when she heard Guan Lianghan's booming laugh as he said, "Xing, since you've returned to the Fu, I won't inconvenience you by staying longer and will leave now. Later, when you present yourself before the emperor, this general will definitely say many good things about you, such that His Majesty will confer you a high government position. I'm off." Ben Zhongjun, similar to the crown prince in earlier chapters who referred to himself as Ben Gong, Guan Lianghan refers to himself as Ben Jiangjun. Zhongjun equals general. This general. Xia Yan walked to the doorway, but Guan Lianghan had already mounted his horse and merely eyed her coldly. Being on the receiving end of that cold glance, Xia Yan could not stop herself from engaging in a cold war. But before she could say anything, Guan Lianghan had already raised his whip. With a jia, he led the way in departing, and the troops hastened to keep pace with him. The entrance to the Jiangfu was surrounded by people who were there to catch the action. Xia Yan quickly walked to stand in front of Zhang Xing. The frail youngster of the past, who had not even been as tall as she was now a tall military hero. When he looked at her, there was a chilling, bloodthirsty expression in his eyes. Xia Yan made a great effort to repress the unease deep in her heart. She looked him up and down, then gently smiled and said, "Xing, you have finally returned after so long. In all these years, how is it that you never once sent a letter home? Your father misses you very much." What could there be between father and son that would necessitate your leaving home, and for 5 years at that? He is your father after all. Her words were gently and cordially spoken, and her expression was also affectionate, but every word accused Zhang Exanji of being unfilial, of having left home in a huff after an altercation with his father, of being cold-hearted and unfeeling. The great Jin dynasty valued filial piety above all else. Even if an earth-shattering situation were to occur, one could not conduct oneself in an unfilial manner. Zhang Exanji did not even spare her a glance. Without ceremony, he walked over to a carriage which had stopped at one side, gently drew open the curtain, and smilingly said, "Arwan." When the person in the carriage had been helped out, everyone could see that it was indeed Zhang Ruan. Xiaoyan was taken aback. She smiled and said, "Ruanyang, how is it that you're here? Weren't you out with Miss when selecting jewelry?" Zhang Ruan smiled apologetically and said, "I should have done so, but I saw Dage leading the troops while I was on my way there, and I felt such great emotion that I returned to the Fu together with him." She walked to Xiaoyan, faced her and said, "I also asked Dage the same questions as mother did just now. Father always knew that Dage did not have the makings of a scholar, and that's why he put his heart and soul into guiding and teaching second brother, and he knew everything that happened in the Fu. When our biological mother was still alive, father was already teaching second brother to read and write from a young age, but Dage was unsuccessful in his attempts. What's more, he wasn't interested in martial arts. However, when our biological mother died, he became brash and impetuous, and decided he might as well leave and chase after his future. Who knew that, in the end, he would actually return as a deputy general? Mother, please don't rebuke him any further. Some good did come out of this setback. What's more, the lands of the front border are bitterly cold, and Dage did not want his family to worry about him, which is why he did not send us any letters. Father must have thought the same way as well, so he did not write letters to inquire into Dage's circumstances either. It was all to discipline Dage's temperament." All of Xiaoyan's words were malicious through and through, and Zhang Ruan's reply was appropriate. After all, when the original foreign was still alive, Zhang Quan had made every effort to instruct Zhang Chao, and gave his own eldest D son the cold shoulder. Even if a Fu's eldest D son was a no-good scoundrel, he would still inherit the family property. What then would compel an eldest D son to take refuge in the army barracks, and strive for his future prospects? The meaning behind Zhang Ruan's words really caused others to ponder deeply. It could be assumed that Zhang Quan did not actually miss his own eldest D son. Otherwise, in this long period of 5 years, why had he never made inquiries about Zhang Exanji's location, or sent him a letter from home? The crowd looked at Zhang Exanji, and started talking among themselves again. So what if Zhang Chao had received all of Zhang Quan's careful, heartfelt instruction? When all was said and done, he had failed the imperial examination, and unexpectedly did not measure up to this eldest young master who could only depend on his own hard work and effort, and had honestly achieved military merit. Chapter 84. 2. Chapter 84. 2. Xiaoyan was naturally mindful of the way the crowd was looking at her, and was so furious that she was about to explode. Then out of the blue she heard a low voice saying Xing. Zhang Ruan raised her eyes. Unexpectedly it was Zhang Quan. Behind him stood Zhang Chao and Zhang Susu with Zhang Li, Zhang Dan and the Yinyangs. Apart from old Zhang Madam, who was of ill health, every member of the Zhang family was present. Zhang Exanji faced Zhang Quan, and extremely politely, yet with an air of awkwardness which belied a lack of practice, nodded his head and said, "Father." On seeing him this way, a sense of dejection surged in Zhang Quan's heart. This son had matured into such an exceptional person, but that also meant that there would be even less means of controlling him. He looked at Zhang Ruan, who was standing by his side. This sibling pair were both equally outstanding in terms of appearance and temperament, but they had unfortunately crawled out from Zhao Mei's womb. Zhang Susu's expression was unreadable. On the other hand, Zhang Chao's face was taut with tension, and he was glaring at Zhang Exanji dead in the eyes like a poisonous viper. Zhang Ruan noticed the expression in his eyes and looked over at him without ceremony, giving him a faint smile. The moment this smile appeared in Zhang Chao's line of sight, he knew it was nothing but naked provocation. He slowly clenched his fists, and the little finger which had suffered forced amputation curled up tightly. He felt as though the eyes of all the spectators were mocking him. Zhang Ruan's smiling expression remained unchanged. Comparison. When two people of the same status appeared in a fu, what people most loved to do was to make comparisons. In her previous life, people had always compared her with Jiang Susu. The more Jiang Susu had stood out, the more undesirable she herself had become. This kind of comparison could utterly destroy someone. Moreover, this time the target had switched to Jiang Chao, who had always been the apple of Jiang Quan's eye. Such an arrogant and proud person like Jiang Chao, if she let him taste what it was like to be thus compared and made to feel like an inferior object, would he act impulsively and do something rash? He who had been locked up in his room, unable to take action, what would happen if he took the initiative to attack? Jiang Li and Second Yinyang stared at Jiang Xing with eyes of hatred. Their hearts were full of both jealousy and hate. With Jiang Xing's return at the very least, no one in the fu would dare to openly bully Zhang Ruan for the time being. How on earth did Zhang Ruan come by such good fate, to reach this stage, and to have such a highly lauded elder brother to rely on? Hong Ying quietly gave a sigh of relief and rejoiced that she was not Zhang Ruan's enemy. With Jiang Xing's return, and especially due to his position as a deputy general, Xia Yan's days in the fu would not be so relaxed. She did not know if Zhang Ruan would really honor her promise to make her the mistress of the fu, but in her heart, she was secretly excited. After exchanging a few painfully polite words with the entirety of the Zhang family at the entrance, Jiang Xing appeared to be somewhat weary, and said, "I am very tired. I'd like to go back first and talk with our Wan a little more. We can talk about other things later tonight." The siblings had just been reunited, so they naturally had a lot to talk about, and it would do no good to stop them from doing so. Just as Jiang Xing was about to walk through the entrance, Xia Yan finally could not restrain herself any longer and asked, "Xing, as you were traveling back, did anything happen? What does mother think could have happened?" Jiang Xing asked in response. His tone was as warm and gentle as it was earlier, but there was also a faint sense of a murderous intent. Xia Yan stiffened and smilingly said, "I was just asking." Zhang Ruan smiled as she said, "Mother has truly hit the mark." On the way home, Dage ran into a group of rebels. "Rebels?" Xia Yan cried out hoarsely, her voice failing her. How could they be rebels? Those men were only lying in ambush for Jiang Xing. How could they have become rebels? To be charged with rebellion was no small matter. If they did not deal with the matter carefully, the entire family and clan of the person thus charged would be guilty by association, and summarily punished. Zhang Ruan said softly, "Weren't they?" Quite a few archers were lying in ambush, but it was a lucky coincidence that General Guan and Xiao Wangye rushed up and captured all of them. I suppose they will carefully interrogate the men and ferret out the person behind it. She smiled coolly at Xia Yan, who was clearly uneasy, and said, "When the person behind it all is captured, His Majesty will definitely order this person to be torn apart by 5 horses." Having said this, she paid Xia Yan no further attention. She took Jiang Xing's arm and walked into the fu with him. Wu Ma Fen Sure. Lit. 5 horses divide the corpse. An ancient form of torture/punishment, where horses are attached by chains to a person's limbs and head, and thereby tear the person apart. Due to the flurry caused by Jiang Xing's unexpected return, a courtyard had not yet been prepared for him, and so he went first to Zhang Ruan's. Lu Zhu and Zhou Momo had been waiting anxiously. When they saw Zhang Ruan and the others walk in unscathed, they were overjoyed and hurried to serve them tea. Jiang Xing and Zhang Ruan sat by the window. Jiang Xing looked at Zhang Ruan and said, "Arwan, do you suspect that Xia Yan was behind it?" He was no longer an ignorant and impetuous 13 or 14-year-old boy, and Zhang Ruan's recent attitude towards Xia Yan had given him much cause for thought. However, how had Zhang Ruan come to know about these matters? Moreover, there was no way for Xia Yan to mobilize such a large number of archers. Those men were clearly trained soldiers. That Xia Yan can't do it herself doesn't mean that the Xia family can't. Moreover, there's also the Li family, and maybe even the involvement of 8th Prince. Zhang Ruan looked at him as she said, "Dage, you are someone who attacks the enemy on the battlefield. Leave these shameful schemes cooked up by the foreign of the back residents to me to manage. And just how old do you think you are to be dealing with such schemes? Jiang Xinji frowned as he looked at her, and his heart was full of sorrowful love as well as anger. Arwan, I don't want you involved in such matters. Leave them to me. If you don't like living in the Jiangfu, then we will simply move out. You are the eldest son of the Jiangfu. What will others think if you move out? There are so many imperial censors in the capital city. Once you have exposed an area that others can castigate you for, they will not hesitate to criticize and raise a complaint against you to the emperor. Then what will happen to your career as an official thereafter? Jiang Ruan stated. I will not move out of the Jiangfu. I don't care about being an official, Jiang Xinji said. Arwan, as long as you are safe and happy, Dage will be satisfied. Safe and happy? Just two simple words, but how many people could actually achieve them? In this lifetime, she was only living to exact vengeance. Safety and happiness were like a mirage, things she could only dream of, impossible to achieve. You have to be an official, Dage, Jiang Ruan said. Only in this way will you be able to trample them all underfoot, and cause them to respect you, fear you, be afraid to bully you. As a result, they will also not bully me. Dage, don't worry about me. I have managed all these years. I can protect myself and I can protect you as well. Jiang Xinji looked at her and said, Arwan, is there something you are keeping from me? Why do you insist on living in the Jiangfu? Why had his younger sister's temperament changed so drastically, and why was she involved in imperial matters? Jiang Xinji had only just returned to the capital city, and his mind was in a whirl. He only knew that somehow, somewhere, some unforeseen event had occurred to precipitate the change. Jiang Ruan said, indifferently, there's nothing. She was as yet unable to tell Jiang Xinji about how Zhao Mei had been harmed. Jiang Xinji would act on impulse and inevitably mess up her plans. Moreover, in this lifetime, it was enough to have one rotten-hearted villain. Jiang Xinji had to live cleanly. All this dirty business and conspiracy must never corrupt his heart. I won't force you to tell me, Jiang Xinji said. Even if Jiang Ruan refused to tell him anything, he would still be able to find out. He patted Jiang Ruan's head and said, since you refuse to move out of the Jiangfu, I won't do so either. I will stay in the Fu, and make sure that no one dares to bully you. Jiang Ruan nodded her head slightly. On witnessing the warm reunion between brother and sister, Bai Ji Lianqiao and Lu Zhu could not stop their tears from flowing. After so many years, Jiang Ruan had finally broken free of all the troubles and hardships. While there was great joy and satisfaction on this side, in other places, the world had been upended. What did you say? Jiang Xinji has returned to the Jiangfu? Xia Chang clasped his hands behind his back and shot the messenger a look of disbelief. Utter nonsense. Even if he had 9 lives, he would not have been able to escape. There was no way this plan could have failed, unless there was some supernatural intervention. Not only that, but, the messenger said very cautiously, the men who were sent have all been captured, and are now being interrogated in prison. Didn't we send men who were willing to sacrifice their lives? Why are they still alive? However, Xia Chang snorted in disdain. Those willing sacrifices have been well trained and will not say anything, no matter what. Find out where they are being kept and find some people to take care of the situation tonight. I don't have to tell you what to do. But, the interrogator is Xiao Wangya. Chapter 85. Chapter 85. The interrogator was Xiao Xiao. Xiao Xiao was in charge of the genie guards and was usually out on special missions. Occasionally, he too would capture people who were determined to take their secrets to their graves. For these people who were under his interrogation, none of them had managed to keep their secrets to the very end. Thus, the more that outsiders did not see Xiao Xiao in action, the more ferociously the rumor spread about him. There was not a mouth that Xiao Xiao could not pry open. Furthermore, his temperament was particularly cold and cheerless. Even if one was acquainted with him, they too would not dare to personally ask him about this. Therefore, they could only surmise that the torture methods that he used were incomparably callous. After hearing the news about him, Xia Chang suddenly felt a sinking feeling in his chest and he clenched his fists tightly. How did they fall into Xiao Xiao's hands? What sort of connection does Xiao Xiao have with Jiang Xing? It was during the ambush. General Guan and Xiao Wangye suddenly rushed there. At first General Guan wanted to bring those people back, but Xiao Wangye said these matters were of major importance and so asked for them, the men, to be handed over for him to personally interrogate. Damn it! Xia Cheng's complexion had turned pale. If this implicates the Xiaofu, then will we still be able to have an auspicious future? He paced in a circle twice inside the room. This won't do, I need to seek an audience with the 8th prince. Make haste and prepare a horse for me. Simultaneously, in another part of the capital, the Grand Counselor Fu was also in a state of uproar. An irate Li Dong was pointing his finger at Li and admonishing, "You lost control of this situation and were unable to end it well. Well, now that's just great. Those men are now in the hands of Xiao Xiao. No matter how tolerant His Majesty is, he would never condone any of his vassals having their own private army without any approval. You have weighed down our Li family with such a huge burden. Now what can we possibly do next?" Lian had always been Li Dong's pride. From his childhood till adulthood, he had always given this son much recognition. Yet, currently, now that something bad had happened to himself, Li Dong, his heart was distracted and his thoughts were in turmoil. Now that Lian had made such a huge slip-up, when Li Dong looked at Lian, he felt that his son was not particularly pleasing to his eyes anymore. With a heavy and cold look on his face, Lian remained where he stood without saying a single word. Only, his expression was extremely gloomy. He wanted to attack Jiang Xing after the Jiang family affair, so that he could win the rest of the Jiang family, and also see Jiang Ruan's pain. Yet he would never have thought that midway through this attack, Guan Lianghan and Xiao Xiao would appear out of nowhere. They had ruined his good work. However, in Lian's eyes, there was a flash of radiant light. He had heard that Zhao Yuanfeng and Zhao Yi had been present too. How could there be such a coincidence? Although he was still unsure what had happened, a cold smile surfaced on Li Ai's face. He was unconvinced that this matter had nothing to do with Jiang Ruan. Noticing Li An's silence, Li Dong was filled with even more anger. You hurry and think of a solution. Now that your elder brother has already become a useless person because of the Jiang family, are you going to harm the entire Grand Counselor Fu just for the Jiang family? What's the rush? Lian retorted. Regarding this matter, I will consult with the 8th prince. Xianli needed his ability and wisdom, while he needed Xianli to support the Li family in resolving this inconvenience before them. Outside the prison, Guan Lianghan had been waiting anxiously when Xiao Xiao slowly appeared from within. As soon as he spotted him, Guan Lianghan impatiently probed, "How was it? Have they confessed?" "It was both Xia Cheng's and Li Dong's people," Xiao Xiao said indifferently. These people were unexpectedly split into two groups. Xia Cheng's machinations aside, according to these people, they had only tried to prevent Jiang Xing's return to the Jiangfu as it would threaten Jiang Chao's position within the family. Yet, as for the people arranged by Li Dong, it was rather peculiar. The people who had been sent were unsure of the reason. They only knew that this order had been given. Guan Lianghan muttered to himself, "This is truly Stang. How could there even be two groups?" He patted Xiao Xiao on the chest. "You are really quite something." However, Guan Lianghan took a glance inside. The method that you used surely wasn't like the one that the girl from the Jiangfu mentioned, using boiling oil to burn the brain. "No," Xiao Xiao responded. He naturally had his own methods. He did not explain, and Guan Lianghan was too lazy to inquire further. While he was conversing with him, Xiao Xiao, he commented, "Hey, with such a person like Jiang Xing who has a good temperament, how can he have such a Mimi? They do not seem like siblings at all. Third brother, you couldn't possibly have become fond of that girl? I don't think that's a good idea. Even though she is so young, her thoughts are already this vicious." Haplessly, Xiao Xiao responded, "She's too young." Towards a young girl, he would not go as far as to have any alarming thoughts. Only, the way that Jiang Ruan had handled matters was too baffling. She seemed to have an infinite amount of secrets. Moreover, judging from all of the matters that she had had a hand in thus far, a deeply woven relationship with Xianli had begun. For her to even have helped Lu Min, if her objective was the entire imperial household, then one would need to be even more mindful of her every move. Guan Lianghan burst into loud laughter. I'm joking, just jesting. Let's go, come on. I still have matters to ask, seventh brother. Come along with me. Xiao Xiao nodded and said, Yi Feng. Yi Feng appeared behind him and listened to Xiao Xiao's orders. Send someone to watch over those people in the prison. Prevent anyone from entering to silence them. Yi Feng cupped his hands in obeisance. Yes, master. In the 8th Prince Fu, Xianli looked at Xiaocheng and Lian before him. As always, his face bore a gentle smile. Xiaocheng patted some sweat away. I implore His Highness to please lend a hand in this matter. The old Marquis and I have always had a close relationship, so naturally I would not remain indifferent and just sit by and watch. However, this matter is of grave importance. Even if I do have the intention to help, I am truly powerless as well, Xianli replied unfazed. As Xiaocheng glimpsed Li An's composed demeanor, his heart was in a jumble as he gritted his teeth in chagrin and beseeched, I beg His Highness to save the Xiao Fu. If His Highness is able to help with this matter, then His Highness would be the benefactor of the lives of the entire Xiao Fu. If His Highness has any use for the Xiao Fu in the future, I, this Xiaocheng, hereby swear that I would definitely go through water and tread on fire for you without hesitation. All along, the Xia family and the 8th Prince Fu had always had a relationship of mutual support. Although 8th Prince was extremely capable, what he had done mostly remained hidden. The Xia family presently had a steady foundation, and the wealth and power they had was what Xianli truly needed. Yet precisely for this reason the Xia family was not easy for him to exercise control over either, thus they had such a mutually beneficial relationship. With this overture from Xiaocheng, this was him clearly expressing his stance, a display of absolute submission and allegiance. Xianli quietly sighed. Since the old Marquis has said as much, I am extremely gratified. However, I am unable to guarantee that the old Marquis will not harbor some kind of hostility towards 8 Prince in the future, and have other thoughts in mind. Then what would happen? Seeing that Xianli had softened his stance somewhat, Xiaocheng replied, I would definitely put more words into action and prove the Xia family's sincerity. I only request that His Highness think of some way to save the Xiao Fu. Xianli mildly assented. The old Marquis has overthought this. The Xiao Fu and I have a relationship. Where one prospers, both parties benefit. If one suffers a loss, all will be harmed too. How could I watch on with folded arms? Hand this matter over to me. I will definitely give a satisfying response to the old Marquis. Only, I hope that the old Marquis will not disappoint me either. Xiaocheng inwardly heaved a sigh of relief as he nodded repeatedly. Yes, definitely. Pleased with the response, Xianli chuckled. So if there is nothing else, the old Marquis can return first. I still have matters to settle with second young Master Li. Whilst both his heart and emotions were unwilling, Xiaocheng glanced at Lian before bidding farewell. After waiting for Xiaocheng to leave, Lian cupped his hands in salute to Xianli and said, Your Highness, there's no need for you to say anything. Since I'm already helping the Xiao family, I should not remain indifferent to the Li family's plight either, Xianli mildly answered. Besides, between you and I, the two of us have a very close understanding with each other. It is unlikely for me to look on without even lifting a finger. Lian nodded, yet in his heart he sneered in disdain. What friendly relations? This was merely the value of being able to exploit them. The Li family's usefulness and value were ever greater than the Xiao family, and that's why Xianli was willing to lower his posture to maintain the status quo. Every person had their own price. This was just assessing the price to consider if it was reasonable. There was nothing else to it. The Xia family's worth was only this much, yet the Grand Counselor Fu was certainly not limited to this much. Xianli had taken in Li An's disdainful response whilst his smiling expression remained unchanged, but in the depths of his eyes a deep intent flashed through. Whilst the power and wealth in the Grand Counselor Fu was considerable, he could still obtain these from other people. What was truly worth purchasing was undoubtedly the man standing in front of him. Li En and Li Yang were very different. Li Yang was just a pile of ignorant, incompetent rubbish. However, for many years now, Li En had helped in devising many strategies for him, and he had regarded Li En as his right-hand man. He needed his ability and wisdom, thus, he could even bear the irreverence that Li En had towards him. But why would the Li family want to kill and bury Jiang Xinji in an ambush? Xianli asked. Xia Cheng naturally did so due to the relationship between Xia Yan and Jiang Chao. One could still understand this. Yet, the Li family and Jiang family were now like opposing points like fire and water. He knew of the matter in which Jiang Su had harmed Li Yang's root of posterity. According to reason, for Lian to get involved and kill Jiang Xing, the one to derive benefit from this would be that pair. Jiang Su and her mother. This just did not make any sense. Lian did not conceal the truth. Jiang Ruan harmed my elder brother. She has an extremely deep hatred and animosity with the Grand Counselor Fu, one that cannot allow the other to live under the same sky. I had initially planned to kill Jiang Xing, then slowly torment Jiang Ruan. Who would have thought that there was such an unforeseen event midway through this? To torture a person, physical pain was the lowest form of torment. Only with mental torture, then could one cause someone else to feel endless suffering. If Jiang Ruan knew that Jiang Xing had died because of her, she would certainly be unable to withstand the pain. Jiang Ruan. Xianli was stunned. How could it have been Jiang Ruan? Second Jiang Miss was merely the scapegoat. Jiang Ruan harmed my elder brother and shifted the blame onto Jiang Su. This is the truth of the matter. Contrary to what one might expect, Xianli had never doubted Li An's words. Only he felt astonishment in his heart. Yet, once he thought of Jiang Ruan's calm response towards the matter in the Xiaofu's ancestral hall, he could not help but have some misgivings in his heart. A female in the lady's boudoir, how could she possibly have such deep schemes? If she had wanted to frame Jiang Su and involve the Li family in the matter, wouldn't that be too much of a risk? However, I have also found out another interesting thing. Lian suddenly revealed a smile. The Zhao family meddled in this, which makes me think that perhaps Jiang Ruan has thrown her flag in with the Zhao family. With Jiang Xing's return, there will be a change in the Zhao family's situation here too. If one could forgive me for shooting off my mouth, when that time approaches, Your Highness may be having some trouble too. Oh, you speak of Jiang Ruan and the Zhao family? Xianli frowned. Then really what is going on? I too am unclear. However, one thing is evident, that eldest young lady of the Jiang family, she isn't so simple to handle, Lian replied. However, this was the best too. Amusing oneself in such a manner was so much more interesting. She had given him a very minor surprise. Having blocked his attack, she had also returned it. But next time, who knew if she would still have the luck to do so? Xianli knitted his brows tightly. For some reason, a strange premonition had arisen in his heart. At first light, Jiang Xing left the food to meet with Guanliang Han. Yesterday's matter was rather curious, and there were still many details to discuss. At the capital Xinfu, Dong Yinger twirled a golden candied jujube into her mouth as she laughed. Ruan Mimi, now you can genuinely crow with pride. Everyone in the capital knows that you have a youthful and well-regarded elder brother, who is tall and handsome. Sigh, he's also unlike those boorish soldiers, truly fitting of his moniker. A fair-skinned scholarly general. I've heard that his good figure on the battlefield is even more heroic. Look at how you've praised him. For anyone who is not in the loop would have thought that he was your elder brother instead. When Fei teased. That's right. Perhaps this eldest Dong Miss of ours has begun to yearn for love? Zhao Jin laughed. Hearing these words, Dong Yinger's face reddened and she struck a pose as if she wanted to hit her. This damned wench, you have been trying your utmost to speak such drivel. Let's see if I don't tear your mouth up. Zhao Jin hurriedly hid as she laughed. Spare me, I've ill-spoken, I was only teasing you. Lin Zixiang looked at Jiang Ruan with satisfaction. While you aren't someone with much ability, the good thing is that you have an awesome elder brother. Surely, that stepmother and Mimi of yours will not easily dare to bully you anymore. Right, Zhao Jin clapped her palms together. Hurry, take all of their share of bullying that they once did to you and deal it back to them. If you find them unpleasant to your eyes, then get your elder brother to break their legs. Who would be like you? Dong Yinger pouted resentfully. From what I have seen, Zhang Dage would not hit someone as he pleases. Who did you think would be as crude as you? Zhao Jin stuck out her tongue and did not say anything else. Jiang Ruan smiled. Whilst he has just returned to the Fu, if there is a chance in the future, I will be sure to invite you all to meet him. However, now that the sky is getting dark, I should be going back. Dong Yinger invited them to her Fu to be her guests. As the young ladies chatted and drank tea, In the blink of an eye more than half a day had passed and the sky before their eyes had gradually darkened. The roads were slippery when it rained and thus, Dong Yinger did not want to inconvenience them by having them stay for a long time. So she agreed, all right. Then we will meet some other day. Bring over a set of my handmade pastries for each of my guests. She smiled. Take care on your journey home. Once everyone had made their farewells, they each returned to their own fu. While she was passing through the city, Jiang Ruan had the coachman drive the carriage through a narrow alley. The horse carriage stopped at the entrance and Jiang Ruan had Bai Ji and Lu Zhu follow after her as she walked towards a household in the midst of the alley. Stepping forward, Lien Xiao knocked on the door and quickly, a young child came forward to open it. The young child was startled upon seeing that it was Jiang Ruan, but politely ushered the three of them inside. As soon as they stepped foot into the main hall, they heard Hui Ju's voice, Miss Jiang. Jiang Ruan saw Hui Ju who was sitting in the hall. Ever since the last time he had entered the Jiangfu and helped Jiang Ruan to purge the sin of having inauspicious birthdate characters, Hui Ju's reputation had made its rounds. It may be assumed that recently, many people had come in search of him. And now, Hui Ju's complexion was much better than before. He probably had been living very comfortably. Yet upon seeing Jiang Ruan, Hui Ju did not feel all too happy. Instead, he felt a sort of dread and panic towards her. He continued, Miss Jiang, this old monk has already assisted with the previous matter. Why are you still looking for this old monk? The great master has misunderstood. Today I am here to return the great master a favor. Jiang Ruan spoke indifferently. In my entire life, I have never been fond of owing favors to anyone. Since the great master has helped me once, naturally, I would also repay the favor. Looking at Hui Ju's puzzled gaze, she smiled lightly. Have I not said this before? Since one has to be a swindler, then the great master should also become this world's most respected swindler. At the moment, the great master has only received a small profit. As for your son's illness thus far, the doctors have only been able to treat the symptoms but not the root cause. Is the great master truly content with that? His son was Hui Ju's sore point, yet every single time Jiang Ruan just had to use his son as leverage to speak with him. Recently, he had earned much silver and was able to purchase many precious and famous medicinal ingredients. Yet, the child's condition could only stabilize but would not improve. Hui Ju lowered his head. This is his fate. This old monk is also powerless. The great master does not believe me then? Jiang Ruan questioned. No matter, but eventually one day you will accept my words. However, today I only came to say a few things. She continued, recently, the flooding in the capital has been extremely severe. 8th Prince and 2nd Young Master Li were given an imperial command to control the waters. Presently, the situation at the reservoir seems to be under control. However, in 3 days, the rainwater will undoubtedly suddenly start to pour down furiously. The reservoir will collapse and a countless number of citizens who live by the reservoir will lose their lives. She pressed on, this will be your chance. I will give you this opportunity to make a prophecy. You only need to say this in front of the public, that the dragon chi is large and in a riot, and the reservoir will collapse. So one must have 8th Prince divert the location to control the rising waters. Naturally, you would need to think of a way to allow 8th Prince to persist in his opinion, and his influence will definitely cause judgment to fall heavily on you. Yet the more severe his punishment and reprimands are towards you, after the prophecy you have made comes into fruition a few days later, then your position will become that much more secure. Qi. In traditional Chinese culture, Qi is believed to be a vital force forming part of any living entity. Qi translates as air and figuratively as material energy, life force, or energy flow. Qi is the central underlying principle in Chinese traditional medicine and in Chinese martial arts. At first, Hui Ju did not understand what she was saying and looked at her suspiciously. Jiang Ruan was not flustered. She merely waited patiently for him to fully realize the significance of her words. When he did, he could not hold back the faint astonishment on his face as he said, What on earth are you saying? Why would the reservoir collapse? The rain will become heavier? Absurd. Complete nonsense. Why is the great master in such a panic? Jiang Ruan smiled as she said, Is it because you don't trust my words? Great Master, haven't I told you before, there is a kind of ability in the world where to know the past is to know the future. She continued, enunciating each word carefully. If Great Master doesn't believe I have this ability, then think of it from a different aspect. For example, what would cause a reservoir to collapse? All of a sudden, Huiju stood up and was unable to maintain his usual compassionate facade. He was in a fluster. Are you crazy? If this was found out by someone, then we would lose our heads. Zhang Ruan smiled lightly at him without saying a word. She was knowingly leading Huiju on. To believe that a person had the power to predict the future yet at the same time be perfectly delighted to handle such matters for her. It was truly too much to expect. But what if she let Huiju think that she was just a front for someone else, that perhaps there was a very able person behind her giving her directions? The prediction may err, but with a deliberate man-made effort and other arrangements, there would not be any slip-up. If Huiju thought someone would intentionally cause the water reservoir to collapse, once he was certain about this point, then he would waver in his decision. This is too audacious, Huiju muttered. The reservoir was highly significant as it concerned the livelihood of the country's people. Yet, Zhang Ruan had just so lightly spoken of this sort of disgraceful, unnatural matter. If someone found out, then even if she had 9 lives, they would not be enough to suffer all the punishment she was due. Yet, at the same time, there was another voice in his heart that was bellowing at him. Agree with her. Accept her favor. Zhang Ruan's mouth curled up in a slight smile as she noticed the changes in Huiju's expression. She knew his heart had been moved. Without the slightest hesitation, she once again lit a flame, T/N, ammunition or fodder, in him. The Great Master certainly has to think this through carefully. With such an absolutely surefire matter, if one only moved their lips to speak of this, then when the day truly arrives, all of the people in this world would have you honored and revered like a god. You would enjoy endless glory, splendor, wealth and rank. If you are thus seen by His Majesty and enter the palace, then you would also be able to receive good future prospects. There are endless imperial physicians in the palace and young Master Ling's illness would surely be able to be cured. Huiju's eyes lit up, only to listen to Zhang Ruan continue. This matter is not entirely without any benefits. However, after this 8th prince will undoubtedly hate you. Still, you need not worry either. Once you have obtained His Majesty's favor, you would be the most popular and respected person below His Majesty. No one would be able to touch you. Although 8th prince might be a mighty figure whom no one dares to approach, when all is said and done, the master of all beneath the heavens right now isn't him. Now the Great Master is almost close to 60 years in age, and to speak of words that aren't to one's liking, no one is sure of matters that will happen in 10 to 20 years. In short, when one is still alive, it would be best to have no worries over one's life. If the Great Master truly wishes to be content with his place and peacefully idle his days away, that isn't impossible either. However, while the Great Master can afford this, young Master Ling may not be able to make it through these days ahead. The expression on Huiju's face was uncertain, and one could tell that his heart was extremely conflicted. Zhang Ruan chuckled. I have already said this much. I shall not say any further. The Great Master still has a night to mull this over. In 3 days the reservoir will collapse. You only have 3 days' time. In the end, as to what state young Master Ling will be henceforth, it will depend on how Great Master acts upon this news tomorrow. Chapter 86. Chapter 86. On the way back to the Fu, Lian Xiao and Baiji did not speak a single sentence. Even though they had numerous doubts in their hearts, they did not ask about them. Zhang Ruan gently rested her head against the carriage's window and closed her eyes. She was unable to conceal the blue-black color of fatigue below her eyes. Today she had purposely guided Huiju. However, tomorrow if or when Huiju decided to carry out this plan, it would depend on his boldness. The more daring he was, the more benefits he would be able to reap from this game. In her previous life, Zhang Ruan remembered that after 3 days, the rain which had gradually reduced suddenly started pouring again. Bochang Reservoir was originally the capital's largest reservoir. For those few days under Xian Li's governance, it had generally been safe and well. However, storms may arise even in a clear sky. Bochang Reservoir suddenly collapsed in the early morning 3 days later. The flood level that was rising became a mighty torrent in an instant. None of the residents living in the residential area close to the reservoir managed to survive, and the whole area surrounding the reservoir became a vast expanse of water. Tianyo Bu's Fingyun. Unexpected/unpredictable circumstance. At that time, although it had happened under Xian Li's management, the emperor did not severely punish him as he factored in Xian Li's merits in curbing the water level previously. Furthermore, it was a natural disaster not due to manpower. It was only after that, when Xian Li mentioned this matter to her, his tone still held some regret. At that time, Jiang Ruan thought that he was feeling regret over the lost lives of the citizens. Only after did she understand that Xian Li's real regret was actually regarding the flood burying his previous efforts of curbing the water level in the reservoir. It was truly as if success and failure both boiled down to the same factor. Qingyi Xiaohe Bei Xiaohe. Raised up by Xiao He, cast down by Xiao He, alluding to Han Xian being made Grand General Fig. A situation where one's success and failure are both due to the same factor. The wheel of fate rotated with a loud bang, and in the blink of an eye, that day had arrived. In the past life, Xian Li had merely had his previous merits erased. It was an unintentional failure. In this life, just like what Huiju had said, the reservoir would collapse, and Xian Li, being overly suspicious, would definitely think that it was one of his enemy's schemes to steal his merit. Xian Li was someone who took responsibility for his own actions. Therefore, the more sincere Huiju was, the more annoyed Xian Li would be. He would definitely not listen to Huiju's advice and even punish Huiju in the name of deceiving people. On the day when the reservoir did actually collapse, Xian Li's actions would be seen as deliberate. Jiang Ruan wondered whether 8th Prince, who had always cared about having a perfect reputation outside, could accept the crime of causing thousands of civilians' lives to be lost. Thinking of this, it was more regrettable than the last life. Jiang Ruan's eyes were still closed, but the corner of her lips lifted slightly. This was just the beginning. The horse carriage drove towards the Jiangfu with a rumble. In the alley where Huiju stayed, a knocking sound was heard again. The little boy who opened the door was a little confused after seeing the visitor, but he led them into the hall. Huiju raised his head and made eye contact with a pair of cold eyes. The gleam from those eyes were too cold, like the unmelted snow at the peak of the mountain, without warmth, only a patch of chilliness. "What did she say to you?" The youth had a slender figure, and his black robe with golden embroidery appeared to be shining in the dark, portraying an alluring melancholy. "I am a monk. Naturally, she spoke to me about Buddhism." Huiju spoke in a soft tone, and he appeared to be as benevolent as before. "Shua!" A sound rang out, though he only saw a streak of silver light flash by his eyes, beautiful but cold, with an unimaginable speed. Huiju only felt that the area next to his throat was cold. The youth held a dagger to his chin, and looking from that angle, he could only see the side of a face with unsurpassed elegance. "Speak." It was a short word. Big drops of sweat dripped from Huiju's forehead. In the Grand Chancellor's Fu, Li Yang, who had been in a coma for a long time, finally woke up. As the days passed, he had been in a dazed and unclear state of mind and would only wake up for a moment before entering a coma state again. Today he had woken up rather early, and the physician who was attending to him felt his pulse and heaved a breath of relief, before walking outside to write a prescription for him. However, he did not think that once he stepped out of the room, he would hear a pop sound from inside the room. A crisp sound of something being broken rang out. The expression of the maidservant guarding outside changed, and she ran inside alarmed. In the room, she only saw Li Yang with bloodshot eyes as he roared in a low voice, "What is happening? Why do I not have?" The latter words were swallowed down by him. The area around his crotch felt empty, and there was even a light breeze passing through it. He stretched his hand to check, and there was still a faint pain. He was a man. Naturally, he understood what had happened. Panic, anger, despair, hate. All sorts of emotions swelled up in his heart. Li Yang felt that he couldn't accept the fact. Seeing the maidservant's knowing gaze was as if he was looking at his enemy. Seething with rage, he took the nearest flower vase and threw it at that maid. Pung! The maidservant's head was bleeding profusely, yet she did not dare to move. She gritted her teeth and stood in her original position. Li Yang, seeing the situation, still wanted to throw when he heard a low voice from outside. "Elder brother, what happened?" The door curtains were drawn and Lian took large strides into the room. Seeing Lian, a flash of hatred immediately appeared on Liang's face. Lian looked at him with a gloomy gaze. "Why do you not continue smashing?" Liang did not speak. On one hand, Liang was really envious of this younger brother who had always been more talented than him since they were younger, yet had a strange temperament, because Lian's talent showcased his own uselessness. On the other hand, he felt a type of reliance towards Lian because Lian was a highly intelligent person. As long as there was him, there was nothing that could not be solved. Liang shouted in fury, "Seeing me like this, don't you feel extremely happy inside? There will no longer be anyone fighting with you in the Grand Chancellor Fu anymore. This time you should be satisfied." When he said the last few words, his tone was more and more agitated. Lian took a seat at the chair beside him and looked at him as if he was seeing a clown. Under that mocking gaze, Liang, who had originally been agitated, gradually calmed down. "The person who hurt you is in the Jiangfu. If you want revenge, then you must tell me without missing out a word the situation at that time," Lian said. Although Liang felt anger in his heart due to the way Lian treated him with a cold and belittling attitude, he did not dare to openly defy Lian. Furthermore, he needed Lian to help him get revenge. He carefully recalled that time's events and slowly told Lian about it. Baoqiu Shuahen, to take revenge and wipe out a grudge. After he finished speaking, Lian asked, "Did you see clearly what that person looked like?" Liang thought carefully again and shook his head. "At that time I was too drunk and did not see clearly. However, that person seemed to have worn red clothes." "Red clothes?" Lian narrowed his eyes. The person who loved wearing red clothes the most in the Jiangfu was Zhang Ruan. Although he had already been almost certain in his heart that the one who had shifted the blame onto someone else was Zhang Ruan, when Liang said it out loud, Lian could not help but feel shock inside. She had actually dared, in broad daylight, in a place just separated by a partition wall, to castrate Liang and then push the blame onto Jiang Su. On the surface it seemed like an impulsive action, doing things without order. However, after careful thought, in this way, she had easily invoked enmity between the Li and Zhang family, and even harmed 8th Prince's power without batting an eyelid. It was really a good scheme which killed 2 birds with 1 stone. No, it should be killing 3 birds with 1 stone, as it could also make Jiang Su unlucky. Lian laughed. She was truly interesting. "Do you know who she is?" Liang saw Lian's expression and hurriedly asked. Over the days that he laid in a dazed state, even when he was sober, he didn't know what exactly had happened. He only had his mind set on torturing the person who had harmed him to this extent, determined to make her pay for her actions. Eldest Zhang Miss pushed the blame onto second Zhang Miss. Lian didn't intend to hide it from him, and directly told him the perpetrator's name. "Eldest Zhang Miss?" Liang frowned. When he went to the Jiangfu, he had wanted to see both the Zhang sisters. However, he had only seen the Jiang Su of unrivaled beauty and elegance, yet did not manage to see Zhang Ruan's appearance. Hearing Lian's words, Liang spoke with determination. "This cheap person. Why did she want to do this? Naturally she has her own plans. Elder brother was only unlucky by coincidence and thus became the victim in this situation." Lian did not feel any heartache for his elder brother's situation. Instead, he spoke with a tone of nonchalance. This made Liang feel even more depressed inside. "I must kill her." Liang gritted his teeth and opened his mouth. "This cheap person. I must make her life a living hell. She is mine." Lian interrupted his words. "You better behave yourself. Such an interesting prey, such a clever young woman. How could he allow Liang to recklessly ruin her? He would, as if playing with a beast trapped in a cage, slowly extract her talons and fangs, and let her witness her family dying tragically in front of her. The expression of horror and indignation on the face that always smiles gently would surely be very touching. She would beg for mercy, cry all her tears, and he would little by little crack her straightened backbone, making her moan bitterly and kiss the tip of his toes. Bao Tian Wu. To waste natural resources recklessly. She was the most exquisite pet, the best prisoner. Lian's eyes lit up with perverted passion in them, and when Liang saw that expression, he could not help but shiver. Lian glanced at him scornfully before turning his body and walking out of the door. Liang was dazed on the spot. Only after Lian was gone, then he slowly clenched his fist, letting out an expression of indignant resentment. He suddenly thought of something and just like that, his expression changed and he unexpectedly laughed. The maidservant who had bled all over the floor continued to stand in her original position, trembling with fear. She had only felt that Li Yang's smile was extremely frightening. However, Li Yang opened his quilt. "Help me up, I want to see father." Jiang Ruan returned to the Fu and was going to return to her own courtyard. However, just as she walked to the garden next to the hall, she unexpectedly bumped into Jiang Susu and Jiang Chao. Jiang Susu was conversing with Jiang Chao, but upon seeing Jiang Ruan she smiled. "De Jejia. Pretend, still pretending," Jiang Ruan thought. Jiang Ruan looked at her with cold eyes. She felt tired, and so could not be bothered to act out a show of sisterhood with her. Therefore, she wanted to walk off without sparing her a glance. Jiang Susu was taken aback for a moment, and a trace of resentment flashed in her eyes. "De Jejia, has Sun Yang done anything wrong?" Bai Ji and Lian Xiao's eyes held disdain, while Jiang Ruan continued to ignore her. Due to the capital's flooding disaster, Jiang Susu had benefited from the natural disaster, and the issue of going to the ancestral temple was delayed. Recently she had been extremely docile and well-behaved. She did everything more carefully and she constantly served old Jiang Madam. Even in front of Jiang Quan she was very careful. Jiang Quan originally already loved this daughter tenderly, thus seeing Jiang Susu like this, he felt even more heartache and had somewhat started to waver from his original decision. Her indifferent look appeared very unpleasant to Jiang Susu's eyes. She did not know the reason why Jiang Ruan, who was obviously a village girl and had grown up in the wild, appeared more noble compared to her, a young miss of an affluent family, who lived in luxury and had always had the best teachers. Whenever she was in front of Jiang Ruan, she always felt inferior to her. This was extremely unbearable to Jiang Susu, who had always chased after the highest status. Jiang Chao blocked Jiang Ruan at the front, gloomily saying, "This is the way you talk to your younger sister. What does the way I talk refer to? Second elder brother, what do you wish to hear?" Jiang Ruan looked at him with a slight smile, sweetened words with a hidden dagger. "Ruan Yang has heard numerous. However, I am not a parrot who repeats other people's words and I am unable to imitate it in a vivid manner. Komi Fujian. Sweet words but with bad intentions. You." Jiang Chao choked upon hearing her sarcastic words. Truly presumptuous to the extreme. Jiang Ruan looked at him. The corners of her lips were still slightly curved, yet had a hint of mocking. They were bound to shed all pretense of cordiality sooner or later. Furthermore, it wasn't as if putting on a facade of being peaceful with one another would really allow them to live in peace with each other. Currently, this pair of brother and sister was not as glorious as before, so why should she be willing to play along with their painstaking act of being respectful and loving siblings? "De Jejia, what words has elder brother said wrong? If you have any dissatisfaction, take it out on Sun Yang, don't be angry at elder brother." Jiang Susu came out to mediate a dispute, yet her words were all trying to sow discord between them. "Disgusting." Jiang Ruan looked at her and said. Before this, Jiang Ruan had always maintained a gentle demeanor in front of them. No matter how much they opposed her, she had never been this direct with her words. However, today when she said things out loud like this, Jiang Susu looked up in amazement and saw Jiang Ruan's gaze of unconcealed hatred, as if looking at a bug in a rotten ditch. Jiang Chao could no longer bear it. Jiang Ruan had tested his bottom line time and again. Jiang Chao suddenly moved his hand out, about to viciously slap it down. However, before he could even attack, his whole body flew out like a kite and knocked against the doorpost with a pong sound. Jiang Xinji strode in and his expression was incomparably cold. He looked handsome and he exuded the iron-willed temperament of a soldier with every move. As he walked over step by step, even the manservant did not dare to say a word. And no one helped Jiang Chao who had been sent flying out by Jiang Xinji's single punch. Jiang Susu held her hand over her mouth and looked at Jiang Xinji with fear. Jiang Xinji walked to Jiang Ruan's side. The cold demeanor from just now immediately disappeared fully. He touched Jiang Ruan's forehead gently. "Are you all right?" Zhang Ruan shook her head. Dage, does your hand hurt? These two, this brother and sister, interacted with each other as if there was no one else, and almost caused Zhang Chao and his sister to vomit blood. Zhang Xing then walked in front of Zhang Chao, his steps very steady. No matter how mighty Zhang Chao was, he was still merely a scholar. Where would he get strength like Zhang Xing's? His face showed fear and he subconsciously wanted to back away. Seeing Zhang Chao this way, anger flared in Zhang Susu's eyes. Zhang Chao also glared at Zhang Xing. You actually dare to raise your hand and hit people? I have just hit you, so what? Zhang Xing's words were shocking. Do you want to complain to father? Zhang Chao, are you a 3-year-old kid? Quickly ask father to come save you. His tone was full of ridicule. The mocking in those words immediately led Zhang Chao to feel so ashamed that his whole face turned red, and the surrounding servants had a hard time holding their laughter in. Zhang Chao choked out, You disrespect your brother. Do not talk to me with all your virtues and justice. 6. Zhang Xing said, You should only tell me whether you are a man. Zhang Chao, today I will tell you straightforwardly that I have hit you, so what? After today, if you dare to touch Erwan, I'll hit you every time I see you. You should know that I am a crude man. I am not as gentlemanly or reserved as you all who have been raised in the Jiangfu. I cannot control the strength of my hand well. With a slip, a life might actually be lost. 6. Reni Dao Day refers to traditional virtues and propriety. Zhang Xing had an army ruffian-like appearance which made all the surrounding servants who were looking at him gape. Zhang Chao also couldn't believe it. Originally, Zhang Xing was the gentle and scholarly eldest young master of the Zhang family. However, his current demeanor didn't have even a trace of his past self. That blatant threat was not at all like the Zhang Xing in the past. Truly similar to Guanliang Han, Zhang Ruan witnessed the happenings in front of her with a slight smile. It seemed like during the 5 years of living in an army camp, the things that Guanliang Han had taught Zhang Xing were not only battle tactics. Lian Xiao could not help but let out a laugh with a poochie sound. Zhang Chao's face immediately became flushed. Yet at this moment, they abruptly heard Zhang Susu give an alarmed cry, Father! Then they saw Zhang Quan coming from the other side of the garden, and upon seeing Zhang Chao lying on the floor, his face turned gloomy. What has happened? Zhang Susu stood up, her eyes brimming with tears. Sun Yang doesn't know how she has angered Dejejia. I greeted Dejejia, however. Dejejia not only ignored Sun Yang, but even spoke impertinently. Second elder brother could not stand it and chided Dejejia with a few lines, but who knew that when eldest brother came back, he knocked second elder brother onto the ground without saying anything. Zhang Susu looked at Zhang Ruan with grievances. Dejejia, what exactly has Sun Yang done wrong? Sun Yang will apologize to you. However, second elder brother hasn't done anything wrong. I beg Dejejia to not let eldest brother harm second elder brother this way anymore. What a good compromise. 7. Every sentence was a direct complaint. 7. Wei Xiu Qiu Chuan. Make concessions/compromise to achieve one's aim. Zhang Xing coldly stared at Zhang Susu, who was sobbing with tears trickling down her face. Zhang Susu's skill of reversing black and white 8 was really not boasted about outrageously. After distorting a few main points, it became a story about this brother and sister pair abusing their power to bully others. 8. Dian Dao Hei Bai. Lit. To reverse black and white. To misrepresent the facts/to reverse right and wrong. Lian Xiao and Bai Ji had difficulty hiding the despise in their eyes. It was just as Zhang Xing had said. The pair of brother and sister only knew how to complain. 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 Truly something only a 3-year-old child would do. Zhang Quan, after hearing those words, did not say anything else and raged at Zhang Ruan and the other unfilial son, unfilial daughter. Kneel. There was some disappointment in Zhang Xing's eyes. He knew that Zhang Quan had not liked him and his Mimi since they were young. Thinking that because he was a son, he felt that maybe it was because he was blocking Zhang Chao's path that made Zhang Quan act in this way. However, Zhang Ruan was a girl completely without any threat. Yet Zhang Quan actually allowed Zhang Chao, the brother and sister pair, to bully Zhang Ruan without care. So this is how Zhang Ruan had been living all those years. A spark of fury grew in Zhang Xing's eyes, and he pulled Zhang Ruan behind him in a protective stance. coldly glaring at Jiang Quan. Jiang Quan, seeing the situation, raged, "Rebel! Rebel!" Zhang Ruan stood out from behind Zhang Xian's body and said, "Father has only heard second younger sister's one-sided statement. Isn't it too biased? If it was on normal days and there was only Ruan Yang, these words could be dismissed. However, Dage is here as well. We brother and sister versus them brother and sister. Both have the same number of people. Both are the Zhang family's daughter and son. Why is it that we do not have the right to speak up?" She smiled. Just now it was obviously second younger sister who was rude to me, and second elder brother still wanted to slap me. Dage only acted out of anxiety. However, who knew that second elder brother, a man, would have such a weak and fragile body, and end up flying away? Zhang Ruan said with joy, "I know that second younger sister has been possessed by an evil spirit, thus her insolent remarks were probably that evil spirit's act of mischief. This is perhaps why she refuses to acknowledge it. After all, even though Ruan Yang is courageous, I am also afraid of being stained by that filthy spirit." Jiang Susu's body became rigid, and Jiang Ruan looked towards Jiang Chao, second elder brother as well. "In future you must train your body more. After all, this concerns the Jiang Fu's future. You flew away after being touched slightly. This truly causes one to worry. However, luckily you didn't injure either of your little fingers or toes." She stood next to her tall and imposing brother who had a soldierly bearing, smiling gently and causing the three people on the opposite side to be so furious that their faces turned white. Chapter 87. 1. Chapter 87. 1. In the time it took for a single stick of incense to burn, Zhang Xinji took Zhang Ruan and left without a care and the slightest loss or disadvantage, leaving behind Jiang Quan who was suffocating from suppressed anger. Unfortunately, the Jiangji Xin of today had received meritorious accomplishment from the army, and his temperament had greatly changed. No longer was he that easy to handle. Yet, Jiang Susu even thought to add fuel to the fire. "Father, look at De Jejia." "Shut up." Jiang Quan was still raging. Seeing Jiang Susu's weak and feeble stature, he couldn't help feeling even more agitated as he stated, "If you're stained by a filthy spirit, don't walk around. Go back to your own courtyard." After that, he glared at Jiang Chao and quickly left. Jiang Susu could only watch Jiang Quan leave with astonishment, while a trace of hatred flashed in Jiang Chao's eyes. The two siblings kept silent, but at that very moment, they hated both Jiang Xinji and Jiang Ruan bitterly. After a peaceful night, the next day at first light when Jiang Ruan woke up, Lu Zhu stepped in with rose pastries. "The rain is easing. It looks as though it's going to stop." She looked somewhat worried, knowing a little of Jiang Ruan's plan. How great would it be if the rain stopped now? Jiang Ruan smiled faintly and looked out from the window. The dense raindrops had become sparse. The water dripped down much slower from the eaves. The air started to become milder, sweeping away the dark clouds from the past few days. It seemed that the sky would clear up before long. Lian Xiao handed the boiled red dates and cassia honey to Jiang Ruan. "It's not the time yet. Just wait." Jiang Ruan took a sip of the honey water and tapped her fingers on the table unconsciously. The rain looked like it's going to clear up, but actually, it was the rising wind that foreshadowed the coming storm. On the edge of the Bochong Reservoir, the reservoir chief wiped his sweat, running back and forth eagerly, constantly flattering the highly respected nobles in front of him. "The water has been brought under control and the reservoir is very stable. After observing the rain over the past few days, it seems to have dwindled down a lot, and it will probably clear up soon. The flood control is all due to the work of His Highness, 8th Prince, and 2nd Young Master Li." Xianli smiled gently. "I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do." The reservoir chief smiled like a blooming chrysanthemum when he heard this. His praise was even more dazzling. "Your Highness is modest. The lives of the people around the reservoir are in your Highness' hands. It is a blessing for the people to have such a man devoted to the people like your Highness in the great Jin dynasty. Later, this official will report your Highness' meritorious deeds to the court without fail." He was full of thoughts. Everyone knew that the crown prince was not in favor. Nowadays, the most powerful in the palace were 8th Prince and 5th Prince. Even though 5th Prince was decent in terms of authority in front of the emperor, He still lagged behind 8th Prince's birth mother. After some consideration, 8th Prince had a better chance of winning. Now that Xianli had done a good job in this matter, he should take the opportunity to please him. If he were favored, his official career would be smooth sailing in the future. When he thought of this, the reservoir chief smiled even more sincerely. Xianli's smile was like a spring breeze. He neither denied nor approved it. There were a lot of people watching the bustling scene by the side of the reservoir. These days, Xianli made great efforts in flood control and the people witnessed it personally. They were both apprehensive and grateful for those in high positions who came down in person. Common people were always the easiest to satisfy. In addition, the reservoir chief excessively boasted about Xianli's merits, and so the people were even more grateful to him. Receiving the admiring and respectful gazes from the people, Xianli's smile deepened. Pride flashed in his eyes. This smile appeared very amiable when it came into the people's view. Praises extolling the meritorious deeds of the gentle, handsome, and noble 8th Prince rang out in the midst of the people. In contrast, Lian, walking beside Xianli, still wore a gloomy expression. His expression made Xianli seem even more kind and approachable. While the people in the reservoir were giving praises one after another, there was an inopportune voice. Disaster! Disaster! The voice was not ear-piercing in the midst of the praises, but it was exceptionally clear. Xianli turned his head to look at the spot where the person spoke from with a barely visible frown. People gradually stopped speaking when they heard this. They saw a yellow-robed monk coming slowly from the crowd. He looked kind-hearted, his robe was clean without any dust, and he acted like a Buddha sitting on a white lotus, with a faint aura of holiness. Someone in the crowd recognized him and spoke out, "Isn't this Great Master Huiju? Why is Great Master Huiju here?" "It really is Great Master Huiju. He is the senior monk in the capital. It's Great Master Huiju who prophesies miraculous things." What did Great Master Huiju mean by disaster? Xianli and Lian stared at this unexpected visitor. Huiju's reputation was now very popular all over the aristocratic families in the capital, especially those families who worshipped the Buddha. They knew that this monk was very capable. However, Xianli and Lian were atheists and had no fear of supernatural beings, so they saw Huiju as a common swindler. Huiju put his palms together. "Amiba Buddha, this poor monk made a divination last night. The divination showed the collision of Western Dragon's vital energy, while the Water Dragon raised its head. I'm afraid there will be a big storm. It will be dangerous. The dam may even be at risk of collapsing." "What?" The woman with the baby in her arms immediately panicked and said, "Is everything Great Master just said true?" Huiju put his palms together and nodded in deferential manner. Xianli and Lian walked slowly towards Huiju. When they got near him, Xianli smiled gently. "Did everything Great Master just say true?" "A monk never tells lies," Huiju answered faintly. Xianli and Lian looked at each other. Lian suddenly stared at Huiju. "Great Master, what do you suggest we do next? Disaster has arrived and is imminent. We should not treat the lives of thousands of people downstream of the reservoir as a trifling matter. Please evacuate those families near the reservoir overnight to a higher ground so as to avoid flooding." On hearing this, Lian chuckled. Xianli looked at Lian and smiled. He still appeared gentle, but there was a chill in his voice. "Does Great Master know the fate of disturbing people's hearts?" Huiju returned his gaze indifferently, neither avoiding nor yielding. He was as lucid as the lotus that rose above the profane world. Xianli initially thought he was a common swindler. But when he saw that the Buddhist monk possessed a remarkable temperament and repeatedly insisted that the people downstream be relocated, he became suspicious. His subconscious told him that this man must have been someone that 5th Prince sent over to rob his merit. Moving all of the commoners' families was not a trifling matter. If he really did so, when everything turned out to be safe and sound, not only would the people's power be wasted, but he would also be sneered at by everyone under the heavens that he was gullible, believing the evil monk's lies. Staring at Huiju's face, Xianli felt increasingly repulsed. The Astronomical Bureau's personnel also said that the rain showed a sign of stopping. As his meritorious deed was in plain sight, 5th Prince wanted to meddle? That's treating his people as idiots. T/N. Astronomy in China has history. As tradition dictated that the rulers of China, first kings and later emperors, should receive their political mandate from the sky, astronomy soon became a dominant science in China. The main responsibility of political power was to keep the earth in total harmony with the sky. This obligation was called the Mandate of Heaven, and the emperor himself was called Tianzi, the Son of Heaven. The stars themselves were bestowed with astrological meaning, both enabling predictions that influence daily life as well as major political strategies, and thus astronomy swiftly became a powerful political tool. One very positive consequence of the Mandate of Heaven on Chinese history was the appointment of a special group of imperial officers who included astronomers, astrologers, and meteorologists. These officials were ordered by the emperor to monitor the sky, looking for astrological omens and astronomical phenomena. More details here. Is there any evidence for Great Master Huiju to say so? Xianli was calm and composed. Huiju bowed his head. Buddha. It's a divination using the trigrams. The divination image has been revealed. This poor monk has no evidence. If there is no evidence, your remarks are the equivalent to deluding the public with lies. Xianli spoke. Fifth Prince's trick was so clumsy, he simply didn't put too much thought into it. Great Master is not that kind of person. Yes, everything Great Master said has come true. What Great Master said must be true. To Xianli's surprise, most of the crowd went along with Huiju. Even though his brows wrinkled, Xianli remained calm and collected. Did Fifth Prince invite such a person to use Huiju's reputation to force him to give this order? He sneered in his heart. Unfortunately for them, he had never been manipulated by others. Without any evidence, it's just empty rhetoric, Great Master. Out of the mouth comes evil. Xianli still wanted to settle the matter easily, to maintain his image as a good nobleman. Huiju sighed. The commoners praised the benefactor for his wisdom and determination, as well as his kindness to the people. Isn't it worth taking a risk for the lives of thousands of people in the lower reaches of the Bochang Reservoir? Shizhu. Benefactor, term used by a monk to address a layperson. Xianli's expression changed. The crowd around him looked at him with less affection than before, replaced by a look of suspicion, anger, and doubt. The monk was stirring up public opinion and provoking his supporters. However, before he could give a response, Lian gave an order. Where did this evil monk come from? He unexpectedly made rude remarks to His Highness. Somebody arrest this evil monk for me. The corners of Xianli's lips rose up slightly. There were many things that were inconvenient for him to do, but Lian could do most of them. He kept Lian not only because of his rare intelligence, but also because he was an expert at perceiving the will of the people. The crowd was agitated. Xianli spoke out at the right time. Great Master is a monk, and I will not treat a monk rudely. But if Great Master continues to spout nonsense, it will have a great impact on law and order in the capital. I will find a place for Great Master to rest and recuperate for a few days. When the rain stops, it's not too late for Great Master to come out again. Huiju bowed his head. Buddha. This poor monk is a mere mortal and has no scruples about dying. But thousands of people in the lower reaches of the reservoir should be evacuated tonight, or there will be many lives unsettled. A glimmer of light flashed in Xianli's eyes. He spoke gently. From today on, people in the lower reaches of the reservoir are not allowed to leave. Those who leave will be deemed as breaking the rules and will be cut down. It had become a tit-for-tat confrontation. Now that the water situation had stabilized, if the monk's lunatic ravings disturbed the original calm of the people's sentiment, it would be very disadvantageous to the merit he had created. Chapter 87. 2. Chapter 87. 2. Huiju looked at him nonchalantly, though no one could see the cold sweat dripping all over his back under his monastic robe. But after thinking about it all night, he finally made up his mind before dawn. The terms offered by Jiang Ruan were too attractive. Everyone rushed towards benefit and all the bustle in the world is for profit. Thus, if he could really cure his son's illness because of this, it would be a huge profit. Although he had no clue who was behind Jiang Ruan, judging from the previous events, This young miss was still so powerful. The person behind her must not be an ordinary person. Even if the opponent was 8th prince, wealth was always obtained by taking risk, not to mention it would be an enormous amount of riches. Huiju had traveled all the way to the imperial capital from Yuzhou. He had swindled for decades and never made any slip-ups. First, he understood some Buddhist texts. Second, he was skillful in deception. The most important thing was that he was bold and scrupulous. The truth was confused with the false became the truth. Even those who were skilled in this field could hardly see the flaws. But today, when facing the royal family, he couldn't help feeling uneasy and confused. However, due to his many years of experience in the end, those emotions left no trace on his face. The more compassionately Huiju spoke, the more Xianli felt that the monk harbored sinister designs. In the end, Xianli didn't take his advice, thus his purpose was achieved. Zhang Ruan once reminded him that Xianli was a man who paid attention to fame. As someone who pursued perfection, while he might detain him in full view of the public, Xianli would certainly not treat him as a criminal. Otherwise, there would be great anger amongst the people. Furthermore, even if Xianli really did want to punish him, it would be in 3 days. But, in 3 days would Xianli still have the chance to punish him? His success or failure depended on this. Huiju shook his head, sighed, clasped his hands and silently followed Li An's imperial guards. The people who surrounded the reservoir's vicinity had no affection in their eyes at the moment, only panic. They were talking about the possibility of the dam collapsing in 3 days. For a moment people went into panic. Xianli felt upset. For some reason, a vague sense of foreboding rose and he glanced at Li An. Li An understood and said with a somber look, "Didn't you hear what His Highness said just now? Don't listen to rumors and stir up trouble. Over the next 3 days, anyone who dares to take a step to leave will be punished by the law." Li An's face wasn't as amiable as Xianli. Both his looks and tone of voice were gloomy and oppressive, even somewhat ferocious. The people immediately fell silent due to fear. Xianli waved his hand and said, "Let's go back." At the same time, the reservoir chief who had been ashen-faced earlier followed him in a hurry, fawning all the way. Although the crowd was still in a panic, because of Li An's orders as well as being surrounded by soldiers, they felt uneasy and soon dispersed. When the crowd disbanded, 2 people stayed where they were. A man in a somber black robe, with a cold and detached facial expression, looked at the reservoir thoughtfully. Next to him was a man who looked like a guard. "Master Jean E and Jean Air have already checked. There is nothing wrong with the dam." Xiao Xiao replied, "Watch carefully what's going on here. If there was no problem with the dam, it was not caused by humans. There was also a hypothesis that the rain would suddenly increase." He looked into the distance, his long eyelashes drooping, hiding the depth of his eyes. "Let's go." In the Jiangfu, Lu Zhu told Zhang Ruan what she had just heard and said with excitement, "Great Master Huiju has made an appearance. 8th Prince has detained him. Will he confess?" "No," Zhang Ruan answered. Lian Xiao and Bai Ji were both worried. They heard Zhang Ruan say, "Xianli is too deep and naturally suspicious. He will not deal with Huiju so quickly, but even if he did, Huiju is able to distinguish his priorities. If he can't bear it, he'll be a rotten corpse. If he survives, he'll be extremely rich. He's a smart man and naturally knows how to make a choice." As a matter of fact, in her previous life, Xianli controlled Huiju's entrance to the imperial court, but Huiju's position was not smooth sailing. There were numerous voices of opposition in the court as well as countless overt and covert attacks against him. However, Huiju still achieved the position of the Grand Preceptor. Such a person only lacked courage for now, but his nature was remarkably unyielding. Wouldn't it be better in this life to use Xianli's arrow and aim it at himself? Her gaze suddenly turned cold. Lu Zhu noticed it and said, "Miss, one more thing, this servant met 5th Nyang on the way. She said that Master received a letter today, saying that he would marry off Miss to the Grand Counselor Fu. It's to the eldest young Master Li. Master seems to be preparing to send the marriage proposal over." Gung Tai, written marriage proposal on which are stated the year, month, day and hour of one's birth. Ridiculous. Lian Xiao couldn't help saying, "Miss is still so young." Any ordinary official family would not marry off a daughter from a D-wife so early. Jiang Ruan showed a faint smile. Jiang Quan made this decision only after he had received the letter. Lian loved to torture people slowly. This must not have been his idea. She assumed eldest young Master Li, sick and bedridden, had finally awoken and was ready for revenge. Shifting the disaster to the east of the Yangtze River, transferring one's misfortune to another, that Jiang Susu mother and daughter pair still wouldn't get what they're looking for. Miss, you absolutely shouldn't, Bai Ji said anxiously. It would be better to ask eldest young master. No, ask master. What's the hurry? Jiang Ruan was calm and unruffled. If he wants me to join the Li household upon marriage, it also depends whether he has that fate. The marriage proposal is almost there, Bai Ji said hurriedly. Master is so ruthless that he wants to let Miss jump into the pit of fire instead of second Mississippi. The people of Yanhua Yuan will be even happier to see it happen. Miss, you have to plan for yourself. Jiang Ruan looked at her anxious appearance and suddenly gave her a faint smile. Don't you believe me? What about making a bet with me? Bai Ji was stunned. I bet that in 3 days Jiang Quan will cry, begging them to withdraw the marriage proposal, Jiang Ruan said. In Yanhua Yuan at that very moment, the atmosphere that had been bleak a few days before was unusually harmonious. Jiang Susu nestled up in Xia Yan's arms and asked, so to say, Jiang Ruan will marry Li Yang, that cripple soon? Xia Yan took a look at her reproachfully. Keep your voice down a bit. Even so, she couldn't help smiling. Yes, the Li family is not an ordinary place. If she goes in, it will be no different from brothel prostitutes. Li Dong. Realizing something, she suddenly stopped and glanced at Jiang Susu. Although Jiang Susu knew nothing about the affairs between men and women, she guessed a little from Xia Yan's words. Instead of being shy, she smiled with satisfaction. Is that so? She harmed me and my elder brother, creating enmity between maternal grandfather and us. Even inside the Fu, she's extremely arrogant. Wouldn't it be letting her off too lightly by keeping her alive? When she enters the Grand Counselor Fu, her life will be so painful that she'd rather be dead, Xia Yan said coldly. Li Yang hates her to the bone. How can she get any benefit? At that time, even if you trample her under your foot, no one would dare to say anything. Jiang Susu's beautiful eyes flashed and seemed to be extremely happy. Suddenly she thought of something. What about Jiang Xing? If he knows about it, he won't leave the matter at that. Your father and I have decided to keep it from him for now. After we are done with this matter, it won't be too late to deal with that little bit *H. Xia Yan stroked Jiang Susu's head. Sewer, whoever harms you, mother will make her pay 1,000 times 100-fold the price. Jiang Susu nodded cunningly and nestled in Xia Yan's arms with a twinkling of malice in her eyes. No matter how arrogant those two siblings were, the one in charge of the Jiang Fu was her mother. There was also Jiang Quan at the top. What about being a deputy general? What about his military achievements? If her father wanted Jiang Ruan to marry a cripple, she had no other option but to marry. Having Jiang Ruan enter the Grand Counselor Fu was also helping her to accomplish her goal. Now, the marriage proposal had been sent to the Grand Counselor Fu. Jiang Quan had an unshakable determination to use Jiang Ruan as an exchange for an alliance with the Li family. Jiang Ruan wouldn't be able to escape disaster this time. Mother, I want to see it right now, Jiang Ruan's tragic fate after marrying into the Grand Counselor Fu. Jiang Susu claimed. Soon. A sinister smile appeared in Xia Yan's lips. The marriage proposal has been sent over. The date has also been set up by your father and Grand Counselor Li. Li Yang hates Jiang Ruan to the bone and his desire to torture her is even stronger. In my opinion, he will marry Jiang Ruan back to his home as soon as possible. I will take the opportunity to talk to your father about it, so that no unpredictable change may happen. Her voice became slower and overcast. However, marriage is ordered by parents and arranged by the matchmaker. No matter how long the night is, it will be a dreamless night. Chapter 88. 1. Chapter 88. 1. In the General Fu. Zhao Guang stared intently at the letter before him. Zhao Yuanjia and his two siblings along with Zhao Yi stood on either side with identical serious expressions. After quite a while, Zhao Guang heaved a long sigh and said, "Let's just do what's written in the letter." Zufu Zhaoyi said in surprise. Even if what Biaomei said previously is correct, if she should be wrong this time, the Zhao family will not be able to bear the consequences and accusations of sending out troops due to a private message. I believe that child. Ever since Zhang Ruan visited the General Fu and disclosed the inside story of Zhao Mei's mistreatment, Zhao Guang seemed to have aged by a decade. This general, who was normally in robust spirits, now bore an expression which hinted at hidden hardship. "Don't worry," Zhao Yuanping said unexpectedly with a laugh. "Not only does this situation concern us, she has even called upon eldest nephew into the action, so she would never put her Dage in a compromising situation. Our Zhao family is a family of high-ranking military officials. There is nothing amiss if a situation should suddenly arise which requires us to call a small section of our troops to duty. If nothing actually transpires, we can plead that we were misled by an anonymous and maliciously sent letter. If something does happen, then we would have rescued a large group of citizens. Whatever the case, our gain will be more than any possible loss." Zhao Yuanping, as the most astute Zhao family male, had the custom of scrutinizing the pros and cons of every situation. It made him seem like a shrewd businessman, but no one had ever doubted his way of looking at things. Since he and Zhao Guang had spoken in this manner, no one else expressed an opinion on the matter. A decision was thus made. If you send troops to Bochang Reservoir tonight, by daybreak tomorrow, 8th Prince will also have sent men to defend it. Don't confront them in open conflict, just kill them all in the shortest possible time, Zhao Guang said to Zhao Yuanjia. "Won't that bring us into direct conflict with 8th Prince?" Zhao Yuanjia frowned as he continued, "I'm afraid that incurring hatred in this direct way bodes ill for the future. Until now, the General Fu has maintained a neutral position in the imperial court by not seeking favor, but also by not rejecting it when bestowed, either. However, after tonight we will be in conflict with Xianli henceforth. When we meet, the atmosphere between us will be hostile, and who knows how many casualties there will be." Dao Guang Jianing. The glint and flash of cold steel. Heated combat. "So, if we yield, he will simply let the General Fu go?" Zhao Guang asked in response. "Go on, just do what the letter says." Zhao Yuanjia and the others exchanged glances, following which, they seemed to come to an agreement and exited the study. Once alone, Zhao Guang once again dropped his gaze to the letter before him. In her letter, Zhang Ruan had asked them to dispose of all of 8th Prince's men quickly and efficiently. No one was to be spared, and they were not to be given the opportunity to seek external aid. Naturally, he understood Zhang Ruan's reason for making this request. If Xianli's subordinates were given the opportunity to call in other people, Xianli would undoubtedly not allow the Zhao family to move the citizens from the lower reaches of the reservoir to another location. As for quietly dispatching all of 8th Prince's men, if the reservoir really did collapse on the second day, there was the great chance of saying that all the bodies had been swept away. Since dead men tell no tales, Xianli would only be able to keep his suspicions and grievances to himself, and suffer in silence. Zhao Guang sighed deeply. He admired Zhang Ruan's ingenious mind, and was also astonished at the decisiveness with which she ordered a kill. However, she was still so young. When Zhao Yulong and Zhao Feizhou were her age, they had been innocent and naive youngsters who had never even tasted anxiety. There were too many mysterious things about Zhang Ruan which the general could not fathom, but he did not intend to compel her to tell him more. If there should be a day when Zhang Ruan truly accepted them as her close relatives, there would be no need to ask, for she would tell them of her own volition. However, he did not know if there would ever be such a day. The scene in the General Fu was thus. Naturally, in the Jiang Fu the situation was different. On his way back to the Fu, Jiang Xing had spotted a vendor selling furong steamed cakes, and bought several slices for Zhang Ruan. When Zhao Mei was still alive, Zhang Ruan had loved eating the furong steamed cake sold in Yanglu Lane. Through the years the lane had undergone much change, but the couple who sold the cakes were still there. When they saw Jiang Xing, they recognized him straight away, and even laughingly chided him for not bringing his younger sister to visit them after so many years. Furong Zhenggao. Furong is a district in Changsha. Hunan, and also means hibiscus. This seems to be a steamed sponge cake found in the northeast region of China, and which probably incorporates hibiscus in some form. Here's a link to the recipe in case anyone wants to try. As Zhang Xing recalled this encounter, he shook his head and laughed. Zhang Ruan received the cakes from him and placed them to one side. She looked at Zhang Xing and said, with a small smile, Dage, be more careful tonight. Zhang Xing was wearing a traditional long gown in deep blue, embroidered with pine trees. He looked so cultured and refined, yet under that soft and genteel gown was his impenetrable military armor. Tonight there would be an attack. Although it was not the same as the bold and decisive maneuvers on a battlefield, it would still be immeasurably dangerous. He laughed and rubbed Zhang Ruan's head as he said, I understand. So, in your heart, your Dage is such an incompetent person? Zhang Ruan also smiled slightly as she took in the warmth of Zhang Xing's gaze. She propped up her chin with one hand, and with a rarely observed playfulness of tone said, in my heart, Dage will forever be the epitome of manliness, a man with an indomitable spirit. Ding Tianli Di, lit. Able to hold up both the heavens and the earth. Figure an indomitable spirit, dauntless. When Zhang Xing had been informed of Zhang Ruan's plan, he had agreed without any objection. This despite the fact that he had never even considered whether or not there would be heavy rainfall the next day, or why the dam would actually collapse. Whatever Zhang Ruan said, he agreed with. On this earth, perhaps Zhang Xing was the only person who would trust her unconditionally, and was willing to do his utmost to accede to every one of her requests. Dage stole General Guan's official seal, but you don't have to send too many troops, just a small number will do, Zhang Ruan said. However, after the event, General Guan will definitely be furious. Dage will probably feel greatly wronged for a while. In her previous life, she had seldom caught a glimpse of the emperor while in the palace. She had only heard Xianli say that the emperor was highly suspicious by nature. The Zhao family was one of the founding families of the nation, and ever since their return to the capital city many years prior, they had amassed great power and influence. Although the emperor still seemed to look fondly towards this revered family, who could tell how genuine and sincere his thoughts were. However, Guanliang Han was different. Firstly, he had been away for a long time defending the frontier regions and had very little contact with the influential forces in the capital city. Secondly, he was somewhat straightforward and outspoken by nature, which is why the emperor had such trust in him. After her plan succeeded, depending on the Zhao family's meritorious contributions would not be enough, Guanliang Han would have to be involved as well. If they could establish a connection with Guanliang Han, the emperor would be inclined to view them with greater lenience. Moreover, if Zhang Xing were to step in personally, this would have great advantages for his future official career. People always say that one should rise upward one step at a time, and not act with undue haste. Zhang Xing had already been promoted to deputy general, as well as achieved great military merit. If preventing a flood by controlling the water saved thousands of lives in the lower reaches of the reservoir, it would naturally be an act worthy of reward. In this way, the first step would be taken into the highest echelon of power in the Great Jin dynasty, and he would certainly stand higher than others. While Zhang Xing was doing this for her, she was also paving the way for him. Moreover, the first course of action would be to tread on the flesh and blood of the Grand Counselor Fu in order to advance. The 8th Prince Fu in the capital city. Xianli sat at the table and sipped leisurely from the cup of tea in his hands. Lian had spoken to him for the entire afternoon. He saw that the next day would be the third day that the monk had spoken of, but the rain was gradually becoming lighter, and seemed to be almost stopping entirely. His brow slowly smoothed out. This maneuver of 5th Prince was absolutely useless. After tomorrow, the minister in charge of recording the flood controls would report this matter to the imperial court. His popularity among the common people would rocket, and he would garner even more supporters in court. Once he finally put that monk he had placed under house arrest in jail for interrogation by torture, if he could get him to supply 5th Prince's name, then everything would be perfect. However, what Lian had said still rang in his ears. Your Highness must not underestimate the eldest daughter of the Jiang family. That girl is deceitful and cunning, and is merciless when taking action. If you leave her alone, She will be a huge thorn in your side in future. If you can hold on to her and use her, she might be of great assistance to you." He was not sure what Lian had been hinting at. A faintly smiling face came to mind of an immature and inexperienced girl. How was it possible that she would be someone who could render great assistance? Wuxia Wei gone. Lit. The smell of mother's milk has not yet dried. Still wet behind the ears, immature and inexperienced. Xianli sneered slightly. He did not know why, but he felt a hint of unease. His subordinate entered the room and said, "Your Highness, the reservoir has been inspected and everything is in order. Soldiers have been sent to keep watch, and nothing unusual has been reported." Xianli waved his hand. "You may leave." He had ordered a troop of soldiers to position themselves near the reservoir in order to thwart any potential action, so everything was absolutely foolproof. After quite a while later, he tamped down the unsettled feeling in his heart and gradually started to smile. They were nothing but a troop of prancing clowns, so there was no need to waste time thinking about them. In another quiet and secluded courtyard in the capital city, several men dressed as imperial bodyguards were guarding the gate. Within the room, the fragrant steam from a cup of tea spiraled up like incense. A yellow-robed monk was silently reciting Buddhist texts as he sat facing the window. This person's appearance was tranquil despite his volatile situation, and he possessed the bearing of a senior monk. In the midst of his recitation, he suddenly stopped, and his eyes flew open. The imperial bodyguards had not slackened in guarding the gate as night approached. Under the curtain of darkness it was hard to see clearly. In the light of the red lanterns hanging from the eaves, one could make out the floating drizzle of fine rain, so fine that it almost seemed to disappear. It looked as if the rain was about to stop. As Huiju silently watched the rain, he slowly stretched his fingers which had been tightly clutching his prayer beads. His perspiration had pooled in his palm. After tonight, if the heavy downpour did not arrive as predicted, he understood more clearly than anyone else what awaited him. These past few days, every once in a while someone would come and speak to him. Although these persons' manner of speech was mild, there was an undertone of threat and a subtle pressure. He could only feign ignorance. Unexpectedly, they did not make things difficult for him. Xianli was the kind of person who placed great importance on reputation. Until tomorrow, he would treat Huiju with all due respect. After tomorrow, Huiju would become the bringer of disaster, the evil monk who had lost all popular sympathy, and no punishment would be too excessive for him. Huiju narrowed his eyes slightly. This was all a game, and it seemed to him that he was on the verge of losing. However, he had no choice but to endure. If he were to change his tune now, whoever was behind Zhang Ruan would inevitably vent his anger on his son. He once again closed his eyes and slowly, very slowly, silently recited the sacred texts. In the Jining Wang Fu, Xiao Xiao silently perused the letter in his hand as the pigeon on his table cooed, "Goo goo goo goo." After some time he said, "Take my official seal, and ask General Guan to come here." A genie guard received the order and left. Xiao Xiao stretched out his hand and tapped the letter with slender fingers, his eyes cold and detached. Jiang Xianji Zhao Yuanjia. The continuous rain seemed to have cleansed the night sky over the capital city. In particular, as the rain had decreased in severity over recent days, tonight's sky was exceedingly clear and limpid, as if in the very next second, a luminous moon would be seen hanging from the branches of the willow tree by the lake. The area surrounding Bochong Reservoir was tranquil and without movement. The barely discernible raindrops fell lightly on the surface of the water, setting off shallow waves, just like the tender and intimate chat between two lovers. Armed imperial bodyguards were patrolling the edge of the reservoir, while the people in the lower reaches of the reservoir had already entered dreamland. Into this still and silent scene from a distance came the sudden sound piu tong, as if something had dropped into the water. One of the imperial bodyguards, who was standing by the water's edge, lifted up his sleepy eyes to say to the person next to him, "What was that sound just now?" His companion waved his hand and said, "I don't know, why don't you go have a look?" The imperial bodyguard rubbed the sleep from his eyes as he moved forwards until he reached the place where the sound had originated. He peered into the depths and exclaimed, "What's going on?" A faint shimmer of ripples disturbed the surface of the water. By the feeble light of the torch, it looked as if there was something there. The imperial bodyguard brought his torch closer to the surface of the water and bent over to take a better look. Suddenly, he felt something cold against his neck, but before his brain could come to any realization, his body had already collapsed. The new arrival dragged him to one side and swiftly peeled off his clothes and put them on before taking up the torch. After a while, the other imperial bodyguard saw his comrade whom he had sent off to investigate the sound returning slowly. "Why did it take you so long? What was it just now?" the imperial bodyguard asked. The returning imperial bodyguard only shook his head and yawned. "Be careful, if someone finds out that you dozed off while on night duty, you and I will be in trouble," the first imperial bodyguard said unhappily. The returning imperial bodyguard moved his torch forward lazily, so that only the faintest glimmer of light fell on his face, which thus remained indistinct. The first imperial bodyguard carried on with his garrulous speech, when he suddenly felt that something was amiss and turned his head sharply. "Something's not right. You are not." The sound stopped abruptly. A dagger protruded from his abdomen. The stranger who was wearing his comrade's clothes eyed him dispassionately. The imperial bodyguard struggled to reach the signal flare hidden in his clothes, but before he could do so, another hand had already snatched it away. Then in the distance, from the darkness of the area surrounding Bochang Reservoir, ghostly figures with dark shadows emerged, just like the strands of a big woven net, approaching the reservoir with nary a sound. The muffled sound of close combat echoed in the darkness. This night, someone set out in military attire, bringing with him 300 elite troops, and lay in ambush at Bochang Reservoir. In a one-sided massacre, with rapidly slashing knives, fresh blood flowed freely. Oh! This night someone slept soundly, in a warm and refined foo. The smoke from incense rose in spirals, and a good night's rest was enjoyed. This night, the homes of the people at Bochang Reservoir were infiltrated by countless black shadows, and the people were moved away in the darkness. This night, in the courtyard of a large, luxurious foo, a yellow-robed monk closed his eyes and recited Buddhist scriptures, remaining in silent meditation for the entire night. This night the breeze wafted gently, the raindrops were as delicate as silk thread, and the night was full of pathos. Some people had good dreams while others remained sleepless. Then, as morning broke on the next day, a loud sound came from the east, and startled awake the still slumbering residents of the capital city. The rain poured down in torrents, as if bowl after bowl of water was being upended. With a bang, the entire dam of Bochang Reservoir collapsed from the center outwards, as if it were nothing but a frail partition. The stored water combined with the rainwater and surged forth with a tremendous rumble, becoming a huge wave in the twinkling of an eye. In a flash, the water completely engulfed the innumerable homes of the people in the lower reaches of the reservoir. Like a thunderclap, the news of Bochang Reservoir's collapse spread through the capital in an instant. The deluge of rainwater had not only inundated the lower reaches, even other areas which were slightly lower in elevation were also affected. When the news reached her, Jiang Ruan was in her residence eating furong steamed cake. In the end, she had not eaten the previous evening's steamed cake. This morning, although the cake was somewhat cold, when paired with hot tea, it had a special flavor. When Jiang Xinji returned, his clothes were completely soaked. He changed into a set of dry clothes and immediately went to visit Jiang Ruan even though his hair was still wet. Upon entering the courtyard and noticing what she was doing, he said, "Why are you eating cold food? You'd better take care, your stomach will be cold." T/N in Chinese medicine, eating too much cold food. Not necessarily cold in terms of temperature, but in terms of Chinese medicine, food that cools down your body in food e.g. lemon, cheese, green tea, can lead to various illnesses and problems. Jiang Ruan gave him a smile. "It's nothing." Jiang Xinji sat down opposite her and smiled as he said, "Everything has been settled. The people have all been moved to Dongpa Mountain, and since it is much higher ground, there should be no issues." Jiang Ruan nodded, then noticed Jiang Xinji hesitating slightly, so she asked, "What has happened?" Since Jiang Xinji kept nothing from her, he said, "Last night, when I was with Biaoge, the general also arrived. He didn't question me about mobilizing the troops for private reasons, and even brought some people to help me." He frowned and continued, "Those people did not seem to be from the army. They were very competent in handling corpses, as if they specialized in killing." Realizing that he should not be speaking of such bloody business in front of Zhang Ruan, he said, "Ruan, you don't have to concern yourself with this. Since Guanliang Han helped you, he must have his reasons. Since he didn't take the initiative to question you, you don't have to worry about it." Zhang Ruan did not understand Guanliang Han's intentions, but there were more important matters to handle at present. Dage, when it's convenient, find some trustworthy people and ask them to spread this in the marketplace. Zhang Ruan handed the note in her hand to Zhang Xinji. Zhang Xinji took the note with some misgivings. When he read its contents, he was dumbfounded. He thought for a while before asking, "Ruan, what did the Li family do to you?" He had initially assumed that Zhang Ruan was undertaking this series of events solely to help the Zhao family. Going one step further, it would be to curtail Xian Li's power and influence and cause him to lose vitality in a short period of time. However, judging from the current situation, it seemed that all of Zhang Ruan's barbs were aimed at the Grand Counselor Fu. The more he thought about it, the more apprehensive he became, and he was appalled. On further thought though, the Grand Counselor Fu must have done something to Zhang Ruan, otherwise, why would she harbor such deep hatred? Ever since his return to the Fu, he had asked about Zhang Ruan's circumstances, but everyone in the Zhang Fu kept silent on the topic. The servants were not clear about quite a few situations, so there was basically no point in asking them about Zhang Ruan. Zhang Ruan said indifferently, "Li Yang is a philanderer and had indecent intentions towards me, so I castrated him, and now the Li family hates me to the core. If he lives, he will sooner or later become my enemy. Either he dies or I die. If I don't eliminate the entire family, there's no way for me to be at ease." She spoke lightly, playing down the situation, but Zhang Xinji's thoughts and emotions were in a tumult when he heard her words. His first reaction was extreme astonishment. Then he clenched his fists tightly and spat out, "Intolerable bully." He thrust the note into his gown and said, "Leave this to me." Looking at her, he continued, "Ruan, if only Dage had returned earlier, you would not have had to suffer such humiliation." Zhang Ruan smiled faintly and said, "It's nothing. It wasn't the humiliation that was dreadful. It was the not being self-aware even after humiliation, never having the opportunity to make a change in one's fortunes, and thus living one's life to the end in utter misery. Just like her previous life." Zhang Xinji strode out of the door. Chapter 88. 2. Chapter 88. 2. In the 8th Prince Fu, Xianli smashed the 9-dragon patterned colored glass tea cup to the ground in one fierce movement, and it shattered into a myriad of sparkling fragments. His muscles were all taut with tension, and his usual mild and gentle appearance had absolutely disappeared, replaced by a furious wrath that sank deep into his bones. How did this happen? Didn't they say there was nothing wrong with the dam? If there was nothing wrong, then how could it collapse? He threw the book in his hand at the advisor who was standing nearest him. Even though the advisor was terrified, he did not even dare to exhale. This was the first time the ever-gentle 8th prince had lost his temper with him. He had always controlled his emotions very skillfully. Even if he had a deep-rooted hatred for someone, he would smile at his enemy, as if the two of them were enjoying a warm spring breeze in a pleasant environment. No one knew the irritation in Xian Li's heart at this moment. Why did it have to be at this time, when he was finally about to achieve all that he desired? He was popular with the people, he had the favor of the emperor, all that was left was this final contribution to society, and he would shine more clearly in the eyes of the great Jin dynasty. The majority of the officials would naturally give him their support, and with more people in the palm of his hand, he would have more clout and bargaining power in future. Recently, he had poured his heart into the matter of the reservoir, thinking that it was a surefire endeavor. How could it all fall to pieces at the final stage? Xianli was a person who was unwilling to admit defeat, and something like this had happened. It was as if someone had slapped him in the face in full view of everyone else. Although he appeared generous and good-natured, he was actually proud and arrogant. How could he tolerate this failure? In a towering rage, he ordered, "Get Li in here." Then, as something else came to mind, he said, "Find some people to guard that monk, and bring him here as well." His subordinates received their orders and left. Overnight, the winds of fortune had changed direction. The once brilliant, wise and outstanding 8th prince, who had rendered great service in flood control, had suddenly become an incapable, obstinate and self-opinionated man who cared not one iota about the lives of the common people, and was even disrespectful to a senior monk. Bochong Reservoir had completely collapsed, and all the homes in the lower reaches were totally destroyed. If it were not for the actions of the city garrisons Zhao Yi from the General Fu and General Guanliang Han, who had recently returned from the border, who had worked through the night to evacuate the people, who knew how many innocent lives would have been lost due to this disaster. The people praised the Zhao family soldiers and the Guan family soldiers as practically being living Buddhas who rescued the suffering and the distressed. In less than no time, they had become the objects of the love and admiration of the people in the capital city. Moreover, Great Master Huiju, who had prophesied that Bochong Reservoir would collapse, was being worshipped with great reverence. Everyone had witnessed for themselves that the rain was gradually dying down over the past few days, such that it appeared to be stopping soon, so who could have imagined that a heavy rainfall would descend upon them out of the blue that morning? If not for the Zhao and Guan family soldiers, the capital city would now be haunted by thousands of vengeful spirits. Gossip in this vein swept rapidly through the streets and alleys, spreading to the homes of the nobility, to the air above the great Jin dynasty, and finally to the imperial court. The supporters of 5th Prince seized this opportunity to justify their ruthless criticism of 8th Prince's methods, and petitions by the imperial censor to impeach 8th Prince flew like snowflakes onto the emperor's table. Even then, the situation did not come to a close. A rumor had quietly begun in the capital city that the dam had been built by a subordinate of Grand Counselor Li Dong, whom he had promoted to take charge of the project, and this subordinate had embezzled much of the money allocated for the construction of the dam. A large portion of the embezzled money had then found its way to the Grand Counselor Fu. It was precisely because the second young master of the Grand Counselor Fu, Lian, was afraid that this would be discovered that he made a supreme effort to cover it up, disregarding the lives of thousands of people in the lower reaches of the reservoir. 8th Prince and Lian had always been on close terms, which was why 8th Prince had helped him with the cover-up. All the authorities in the world know that fish cannot survive when the water is too clean. Thus, if the court officials, no matter at what level, were to practice graft on a small scale, that was a matter of little concern. However, Bochong Reservoir had been the largest reservoir in the Great Jin dynasty. The people residing in the capital city had relied on its water for drinking and daily usage, and it was also the source of the water for irrigating thousands of acres of fertile land. Graft on a small scale was no big deal, but if the extent was too large, then it would be like termites boring into the heart of the country. Shuiji Qingzi Wu Yu. Part of the saying, lit. When the water is too clean, there are no fish. When one is too critical, one has few friends/followers. In particular, Lian's method of handling the situation at this critical juncture was tantamount to killing people in order to prevent them from divulging a secret. What's more, he had planned to silence thousands of lives at one fell swoop. The entire kingdom was in shock, and the emperor was furious. Without hesitation, he issued a decree. The Grand Counselor Fu was corrupt and in flagrant abuse of the law. The damage to the dam was an unforgivable crime, and the Fu's people were to be escorted to prison to await trial. At this time, Lian was at 8th Prince's Fu talking to Xian Li. Xian Li said angrily, "How on earth did this happen? How could what the monk said be true?" Lian was also somewhat baffled for the first time in his life. After some thought he said, "This was obviously well planned, and it must be connected with the Zhao family. Last night, Your Highness Imperial bodyguards all vanished into thin air, and it can be assumed that they succumbed to the vicious attacks engineered by the Zhao family and Guanliang Han. However, in the end their soldiers are all from the army. How is it possible that they did not leave behind even the slightest trace? What's the use even if they did leave traces behind?" Xianli said, "I can't possibly tell anyone about this situation, so I will just have to suffer all this pent-up grievance alone. Besides, since our opponents have no scruples slaughtering people, they have definitely prepared countermeasures." He clenched his fist and said, "The Zhao family? I'm surprised that they would throw their lot in with 5th Prince. Your Highness, I still think there's something very fishy about this situation. It may not be the doing of 5th Prince, Lian said. Xianli looked at him contemptuously and said, Lian, this prince has already trusted you many times, but this time you have failed. Bendian. As Irisu explained in Su-71, this literally means this palace hall, but often it refers to a royalty who owns their own palace, which in and of itself signifies immense status and power, referring to themselves. Your Highness, please punish me. Lian hurriedly knelt down to seek forgiveness, but in his eyes there was a flash of mockery. Enough, Xianli said as he waved his hand. At present, Father Emperor is certainly in a rage. I have to beg for forgiveness, otherwise we will be left with no way out. Just as he said this, an imperial bodyguard suddenly rushed in. When he saw Xianli, he quickly knelt down and said, Your Highness, something has happened. Xianli frowned. What is it? The imperial bodyguard eyed Lian. Xianli said, Speak. His Majesty the Emperor has issued an imperial decree that the people of the Grand Counselor Fu be imprisoned to await trial. What? Lian abruptly stood up. The imperial bodyguard swiftly narrated the entire series of events. Xianli's brows were tightly knit. This situation looked to be a really great misfortune for the Grand Counselor Fu, but his own Fu was linked with his in innumerable ways. Even though the Emperor had yet to say anything at present, Xianli was afraid that he had already fallen out of favor. Lian was totally dumbfounded and had no clue what to do. A vague premonition unexpectedly arose in his heart. It was not as if the Emperor had no idea what the Grand Counselor Fu was up to in the capital all these years. It's simply that he had closed one eye to the proceedings because the situation in the imperial court required balance. There was a need for the Grand Counselor Fu, for once this balance was disturbed, the current excellent situation in court would be destroyed. The Emperor knew this, and so did the Grand Counselor Fu. Since they had a strong backing, as long as the relevant people behaved appropriately within the understood norms, there would be no issue. But now the Emperor had actually imprisoned the people of the Grand Counselor Fu. For a person who had achieved unbounded glory, being imprisoned only had one significance: that he would never again regain his previous position. The Emperor was unshakable in his resolve to punish the Grand Counselor Fu, thus what could anyone do about it? Xianli frowned and said, Father actually believes such a preposterous story. The rumors circulating outside are very fierce, the imperial bodyguard said cautiously, and they are very persuasive. The men the Emperor sent to seize the Grand Counselor Fu really did find countless precious stones and jewels as they searched. Lian stood rooted to the spot in a daze. Bochong Reservoir had indeed been built by the person Li Dong had promoted to the position. Of course there had been graft, but it should not have been to the extent that the dam would collapse so easily. At the very least, the foundation should have been stable. There was a tacit understanding within the imperial court about what would happen to the silver for the construction project, but to have the dam suddenly collapse was absolutely unexpected. Hence, the numberless rumors swirling about. To say nothing of the great amounts of gold, silver, and precious stones found in the Grand Counselor Fu. Although the majority of these valuables had nothing whatsoever to do with the reservoir building project, under present circumstances, people would definitely associate them with the silver that was allocated to the reservoir project. A few days ago, Xianli had even hinted to the Emperor that the state treasury was empty, and that it would be possible to find a solution in the fuss of the higher-level ministers. His intention was to target the Zhao family, but out of the blue, they had started distributing kanji, making it difficult for the Emperor to move on them. Right now, the great amount of valuables in the Grand Counselor Fu were like a ready-made meal that had opportunely appeared before the Emperor. So much wealth, how could the Emperor not be tempted? What's more, with the damage caused by the flood disaster, the state treasury would be in even greater need of replenishing. Thus, with layer upon layer weighing them down, how could the Grand Counselor Fu even have the slightest glimmer of opportunity to escape? In this way, the Grand Counselor Fu collapsed and 8th Prince also suffered a great loss of power and influence. Meanwhile, 5th Prince had benefited the most, but the Zhao family had also gained much. Why had the General Fu, who had always remained aloof from worldly affairs, and quietly remained neutral, acted so uncharacteristically? The disappearance of several hundred elite soldiers the previous night clearly had their signature all over it. When had the methods of the General Fu become so ruthless? And what about Guanliang Han? Why had Guanliang Han taken part in this affair? Lian swiftly made connections between all these, the General Fu, Guanliang Han. Suddenly, a name appeared in his mind, Zhang Xinji. Oh. The General Fu was the family of Zhang Xinji's biological mother, and Zhang Xinji was Guanliang Han's deputy general. The faint smile of a young lady appeared before him, a charming young lady with cold eyes, bearing an ambiguous expression. He suddenly remembered what Li Dong had mentioned to him the day before. Your elder brother wants to marry that slut, Zhang Ruan, and the Zhang family has already made arrangements to send the Gung Tai over. Oh. At that time he had been preoccupied with checking the area around the reservoir to ensure that nothing was out of place, and was disinclined to argue with Li Dong. However, now that he thought about it, those words were like a bolt of lightning appearing out of the blue and ferociously striking his heart. If Li Yang wanted to marry Zhang Ruan, it could only be to torment her, because Zhang Ruan had castrated him. But before the Gung Tai could be sent over, the Grand Counselor Fu had been seized and searched. A dreadful conjecture came to mind, that the General Fu had changed from its usual laid-back style to a ruthless and aggressive one, that the Guan family soldiers had been involved. Could it all have been due to Zhang Ruan? While he was waiting for the opportunity to lure his prey into the trap, the prey had instead aimed at his backyard. A diversion. It was an excellent diversion. Shangdongji 11, lit. To threaten the east and strike to the west. Lian stood where he was, feeling the great weight of depression in his heart. He abruptly straightened his neck and spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Young Master Li, the imperial bodyguard said in shock. Xian Li also stared at him in shock. Lian was a subtle and profound person, highly intelligent and self-controlled. When had he ever been so dazed and beside himself in distraction? He frowned and said, "Why don't you first?" "Your Highness, there's something I have to do." Without warning, Lian cupped his hands in salute and said, "Lian will take his leave first." So saying, he leapt out of the window and disappeared. "Your Highness, should we give chase?" an imperial bodyguard asked. Xian Li waved his hand. "No need. He is an intelligent man, and he won't do anything without reason." He kneaded his forehead. This sudden situation had left him feeling unbearably exhausted. It was truly hard to understand. How could something that was as good as guaranteed turn out this way? The present circumstances of the Grand Counselor Fu had really put him in a difficult position, neither able to retreat or advance. He would have to sacrifice his rook to protect his king, but this rook was his most important bargaining chip. How could he be willing to do so? "Why hasn't that monk been brought here yet?" Xian Li asked in a rather jittery manner. It was clear that the damage to the reservoir had been man-made, but the rainfall becoming heavier could not possibly have been orchestrated by humans. Could it be possible that the monk actually had some gift? If this were true, if he could make use of him and snatch him from Fifth Prince's hand, it would make up for the losses he had incurred previously. Just as he asked this, an imperial bodyguard ran into the room and said, in a panic, "Your Highness, it's not good. Someone has seized hold of that monk." In the Guanfu, Guanliang Han paced back and forth looking at Xiao Xiao, who was looking pensive. He could not help but say, "I've King reached the end of my patience. Why won't you let me ask Zhang Xinji about last night's happenings? How dare you steal my seal? And why did you suddenly deploy your troops last night? You're not worried that rascal Xian Li will recognize your genie guards?" He won't say anything. Xiao Xiao sat in front of the table and said, "It's very obvious. Someone wants to deal with the Li family." "The Grand Counselor Fu?" Guanliang Han burst out in laughter before saying, "The Grand Counselor Fu has been seized and sealed. I am utterly delighted. Li Dong, that old boar, I always knew that there was something off about him. For so many years, he's been prancing around in the skin of the Grand Counselor, and this time he's fallen flat on his face." "What did you just say? Someone wants to deal with the Li family? Who? Zhang Xinji?" "Zhang Xinji doesn't know anything at all. There's no use asking him," Xiao Xiao said indifferently. "You won't say anything about this, you won't say anything about that. You'll be the death of me. Guanliang Han said. How did the Zhao family get mixed up in this? Furthermore, what kind of ability does that monk next door really have? He just has to say a few words about the rainfall getting heavier and the reservoir collapsing, and you all just up and move all the people to the top of the mountain? This be **RD is too godlike. Watch Huiju closely and get some men to protect him, Xiao Shu said. As a reminder, Xianli is bound to ask all over the place for his whereabouts, and might even arrange to kill him to prevent his secrets from being found out. Understood. Guanliang Han rubbed his hands together and said, whoever Xianli's enemy is, he's my friend. This monk is so interesting. In one move, he has negated all the merit Xianli gained through his contribution to flood control. Even if it was just to annoy Xianli, I would still protect him well. Xiao Xiao nodded and said, many thanks. No need for courtesy. Guanliang Han eyed Xiao Xiao and sighed. Even though I have no idea what you're doing secretly, third brother, I still want to offer you some advice. Don't get mixed up in the piddling matters of the imperial court, otherwise you will find it hard to avoid getting sucked in yourself. They had been sect brothers for many years, so he naturally understood Xiao Xiao's temperament. He was a master at withholding information. If he did not want to say anything, not even a knife at his neck would persuade him to speak. The previous night, Xiao Xiao had unexpectedly and urgently asked him to go to the Jining Wang Fu, where more than 100 genie guards had dressed to look like Guan family soldiers, and proceeded to thoroughly slaughter the imperial bodyguard Shuaili had positioned at the reservoir to guard it. The genie guards had always been trained to carry out secret missions, so there was absolutely no trace of the massacre. Although he had no idea what Xiao Xiao's intention was, Guanliang Han did not probe further. I only want to confirm something, Xiao Xiao coolly said with lowered eyes. A heavy fall of rain, and what had collapsed was not only the reservoir, but also the stable imperial court the great Jin dynasty had experienced over the past few decades. The capital was in chaos and everyone felt insecure, especially the people who were associated with the Grand Counselor Fu. If they weren't hiding behind closed doors, they were packing all their belongings and preparing to flee overnight. The Grand Counselor Fu had been stripped of all its glory and had been reduced to nothing but a pile of mud. Whoever was tainted by it would suffer misfortune. In the Jiangfu, Jiang Quan angrily told Xia Yan, bring me Ruanyang's gung tai. Although Xia Yan was extremely unwilling to do so, she could only plaster a small, sweet smile on her face and obediently place the gung tai which they had prepared to be sent to the Grand Counselor Fu in Jiang Quan's hand. Smiling, she said, Ruanyang, this child has such good fortune as there's still time. If this were one day later, she would have been married off to the Li family, and she would be considered guilty by familial association. However, in her heart, she harbored a deep hatred. Why did she have to be so fortunate? Just one day's difference, just one day. If not for that one day, Zhang Ruan would have been imprisoned just like the rest of the people in the Grand Counselor Fu. Why was she so fortunate so as to have dodged this calamity? Jiang Quan took the gung tai from Xia Yan and reprimanded her. In a low voice, women's opinions are impossibly stupid. He looked once again at the gung tai in his hand and sighed in relief. Thank goodness there was still time. From the looks of things at the moment, the emperor intended to put the Grand Counselor Fu in order. At this time it was most important to protect oneself. If Zhang Ruan had really been married into the Li family, it would not only have been her suffering misfortune, the entire Zhang family would also have to accompany her in suffering. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.